January 6th was an attempted insurrection.
I agree wholeheartedly.
Okay,
I think
good chat. All right. Well, do you know any conservatives that would fight against this point, or?
So what I've seen relatively consistently is that they would do a whataboutism where I think that they're also going to point to the deep state that, with Alex Jones in particular, this is going to be huge.
Not to appeal to Occam's razor, isn't it so much simpler to just assume that Trump wanted to hold on to power by any means necessary? And if I give you that statement, it describes literally every single action that Trump has taken. For instance, can you find me a single action that would be incongruent with that statement?
Yes. Let's give you an easy one. He starts a war right before the election and then declares, because we're in a serious war, that he can't be removed from power like Zelensky.
So your argument is that because Trump didn't start World War III, he must not have been doing everything he could to hold on to power?
Where do you want to start?
Here's my general feeling and outline. Where I'm at right now, okay?
Yep.
I would say that January 6th was an attempted insurrection by Donald J. Trump. That's where I'm at right now. Where do you want to start? How do you feel about that?
I agree wholeheartedly.
Okay,
I think
good chat. All right, well.
Yeah, well, it might literally be a 10-minute agreement session and then we'll dip. So my issue is, the word Republican has the root word republic, right? And with republics, you're supposed to have rules and norms and process and the rule of law and all that kind of shit. And I don't think Donald Trump cares about any of that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Yep. And so I think that Peter Strzok and the wine moms were ultimately proven correct in the fact that Donald Trump doesn't give a shit about the Constitution. He doesn't care about, how institutions are supposed to function. He doesn't care about the logistics issues involved in how they function. And as a result, they viewed him as a danger to the Republic. And I think they were correct in that assessment.
Do you know if Rob Noerr would fight against this point, or do you know any conservatives that would fight against this point, or?
So what I've seen relatively consistently is that they would do a whataboutism where, well, not just that, but they would say that the rules and norms were violated in order to keep Donald Trump out of office. I think they would say the same thing about the Colorado ruling with, him being precluded from being voted for. They would see that as like Democrats ruling against him. I think they would also point to the article that basically said, hey, yeah, we did do a conservative media push to make sure Trump didn't win. Suck on that, losers. I think they would point to that as Democrats doing the same thing by a different name.
Gotcha. Do you know any other any other conservatives that would fight on the J6 insurrection point itself, or no?
Oh yeah, I mean, like if you were looking for somebody specifically to fight, then yeah, I mean, Endernax, I'm sure Rob Noerr.
Rob says he's available at 9.
Yeah.
Is there anybody that's free right now that wants to hop in and chat?
Not that I know of. No.
What was the one guy you said? You said Endermax?
Endernax. He's an old friend of mine. Unfortunately, he went schizophrenic in the past year and turned into a Christian nationalist, like really hardcore. But he's probably just going to simp for Donald Trump and say that whatever laws he broke was based.
Okay.
Is it your heart was set on that specific framing?
Well, I think so, because I have a debate with, I think, Alex Jones and Glenn Greenwald in a week relating to J6 stuff. I'm guessing both of them are going to take the contrary position.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I could still prep you for that off of what I've seen. I'm still swimming in those circles.
Is there any possible, because I just started reading the actual J6 commission for the first time, and holy shit. I'm so curious, like, what possible opposite side could possibly exist to any of this. I'm just so curious. That isn't a whataboutism about Trump, or I'm sorry, that isn't a whataboutism about BLM or Obama or anything else, like just in terms of this particular issue.
Oh, hell yeah. So, yeah, I can articulate this relatively well. If it gets boring for you, just let me know. I'll jump off, but I still think I can articulate this.
Okay, yeah.
So what's gonna happen, what I think a lot of people is going to happen, is they're going to point to the beginnings of Crossfire Hurricane, the media leaks about Russia, Russian ties to Trump, et cetera, et cetera. They're going to view that as Hillary Clinton and her cronies leaking that information intentionally in order to fuck up his potential election in 2016. I think that they're also going to point to the deep state, that, with Alex Jones in particular, this is going to be huge. The deep state no longer represents the true will of the American people. So the institution was threatened by somebody who would get us out of all these forever wars and wars on behalf of Israel, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know if Alex Jones will go for wars for Israel, but people around him would. Do you have any objections to that so far, or should I keep going?
Well, yeah, I want to know in regards to very specifically, like, was J6 and Insurrection driven by false information that Trump knowingly propagated? That's like the thesis, yeah.
No, what they would say is that none of these things were properly investigated, and everyone who ruled against the Trump stuff was basically sympathetic, and that the lawyers who have now pled guilty or whatever, they were basically intimidated out of... intimidated out of truly doing their jobs.
Sure. So hold on real quick. Lex says, for a debate with Shapiro on topic of Trump versus Biden, how big of your argument against Trump and for Biden is Jan 6? I personally would think that this would be solely disqualifying. I don't know how much Shapiro wants to spend on J6, but it'll probably be a decent chunk because I know that Shapiro takes the position that Trump is no more authoritarian than any other Democratic president. So if he wants to argue over this, I will, especially now that I have a lot more information about it. But so how would they respond to the idea that, like, for the J6 commission, the majority of the people that were contacted were Republicans? It was Trump's chiefs of staff. It was Trump's attorney generals.
They're rhinos. They're deep state operatives.
Every single one of these people is a deep state operative. Every single person that Trump picked for his campaign, every single lawyer, every single White House staff, every single cabinet member, every single...
Yeah, it's the uniparty. So this isn't my belief, by the way. I'm articulating these things for the sake of contention, right? Mm-hmm. The concept is that since World War II, the United States has been controlled by the military-industrial complex and three-letter agencies. So when you look at our interventions in Vietnam, when you look at the JFK assassination, when you look at our seizure of interest in the Middle East and North Africa, all of this was to create a global commercial empire that no longer advocates in the interest of the United States as a nation. And so what's happened is when you see things like mass immigration, when you see things like wars in the Middle East, when you see things like America's unquestioned support for Israel, this isn't the individual interest of the United States. This is the globo homo uniparty globalist cabal.
All right.
Do you know what the problem with that is, though?
Everything.
Well,
I mean, my biggest problem with it is that
kind of right.
Well, but not in the way they say they are.
Sure, but at the same time, like, if you look at America's like foreign policy or whatever, we're not acting in the individual national interests of the United States. We're acting on behalf of a $65 trillion commercial empire.
That might be the case, but we're also acting generally in accordance with the democratic will of the American people, no? Like, I feel like our democratic regime is pretty responsive to public opinion when it comes to, like, why did we leave Vietnam? Or why did we, why didn't we intervene as much in Syria? Why didn't we intervene as much for... I don't know.
Yeah, but
go ahead, sorry.
But they would argue that the Uniparty has consistently lied people into conflict, and when we have avoided conflict, it's almost through luck and also like a lack of American interest. So if there was sufficient geopolitical interest to be on the ground in Syria or Libya, we would have been. We just didn't have the popular will or international will to do that kind of stuff. But ultimately, the Americans argue how much we should be involved in Syria versus the fundamental question of why the f*** are we in Syria at all?
And if I push for proof on any of this, it's just going to be all circular narrative building, right?
Well, I mean, I would relatively say so, but then I think what you need to do, just from me to you, I'm not a neoliberal, globalist, cosmopolitan person, but at the same time, I think what you would need to do is you would need to say that the new global order with America at the helm is in America's interest. So having kind of like a new Roman Empire of which America is the foundation is actually in our national interest. That having Funko Pops and PlayStations and cheap oil and the world's cuisine at your fingertips is actually something good for the American people. I mean, I've heard you do this for years. Like when you had anti-immigrant people like Lauren Southern and other anti-immigrant people, you argued for the fact that you're like, well, cuisine is a huge part of culture. Like immigrants are a huge part of the American story. You've argued this in the past. You're just going to have to do it again.
Yeah, it just feels really cucked and boring and like the laziest bullshit in the world.
Well, I mean,
okay.
What you can't hit the popular notes from Destiny circa 2018.
It's just boring to me. I'd rather like fight on the facts or like have like an actual intricate, nuanced conversation related to certain things, not like the general globo homo debates back and forth. But
sure. Well, but then you can wrestle them to the ground and go over details. But I'm going to largely agree with you. If you look at it, I don't know how much of the January 6th testimony that you've actually watched, but the one that was particularly damning for me was the attorneys general. Have you seen that yet?
I'm literally on page 54 of the executive summary, and then I've read a couple other small sections. I'll probably just read the entire executive summary and then dive into the more specifics if I need to. But which part of the Attorney General? You mean Barr's statements? Which ones? The ones that Barr was making about... sorry, go ahead.
The ones, I think after Barr left, it was basically whoever was left in the department leading up to January 6th. So probably about 30 days out from January 6th. This is the effective narrative. Are you okay with me saying the narrative in my own thing? I know sometimes you like to get it without color. Okay. So the narrative that I heard or watched from their direct testimony to Congress, which I thought was damning, was effectively that Trump was not willing to go down. He wasn't listening to anybody from the GBI in Georgia, which is the Georgia Bureau of Investigations. He wasn't listening to the DOJ when they said that a majority of his fraud stuff was all bullshit. And so what he was considering, or what he asked the Attorney General to do multiple times, was draft a letter that they were going to release publicly saying that there was fraud in XYZ key states that were going to be necessary for Trump to win or at least contest the elections of the results of the election. The attorneys general said, we already investigated the fraud that you alleged. It's all baseless so far, and the stuff that we have found would not change the nature of the election. Therefore, we're not going to do that letter.
Yeah.
Trump at that point then he's considering firing the attorney general and like the deputy attorney general, and then hiring somebody who has never done criminal law before. He's actually an environmental lawyer who works in their bureau for some reason, but he's like 15 down the chain. And the reason why is because this guy jumped around the chain of command and told Trump that not only would he be willing to do it, but he could accomplish what Trump wanted. And so based off of the attorney's general testimony, what they think the game plan was effectively that they spent like a day talking him out of and talking shit to this environmental lawyer's face was they were going to bring in the environmental lawyer. They were going to fire the two attorney generals. They were going to draft that letter. They were going to try to get Vice President Mike Pence to kick out the election results, right? Right, and then capitalize on that confusion in order to contest the result and remain in power. And they basically said, there's no way in this is going to work. And if you do this, not only are we leaving, we're taking half of the DOJ with us because this is effectively a coup.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that the hammer that I would, if I were in your shoes, not that I am, but if I were in your shoes, the hammer that I would be beating people's heads in with is the fact that these people, yeah, sure, they might be institutionalists, they might be Republicans, they might be lawyers, they might be part of the quote unquote deep state, but they knew that this was bullshit. They testified to the fact that it was bullshit, and they testified to the fact that Trump knew it was bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and I think it was one of the most glaring legal and social interactions that kind of showed me that this person doesn't give a
Well,
I know this isn't maybe not particularly sexy for you individually because, maybe you're looking for some more heat and more contradiction, but can I share one more thing with you?
yeah, go for it. And no, it's fine. Like, I already don't expect this to, I don't expect this to be a totally fact-based discussion. I'm trying to ascertain, like,
how do I make it sexy and interesting?
No, I'm trying to figure out what strategy I want to run with for the debate, and then how much a command of the facts will help me. Because I think generally having more and more facts is generally beneficial, but it depends on like the thesis that I'm going to present, and it depends on how far away we're going to get. Yeah.
Well, and I think you're going to have to be flexibly ready for both, right? I think if they start disputing on the facts, and you're going to have to hammer them on the facts, and then if they jump to the broad strokes, then you need to be ready to do globo homo. I mean, that's just my personal advice.
Mm-hmm.
But so I know that I jumped on stream a while ago to kind of share with you my specific definition of fascism based off of Giovanni Gentile, flexible authoritarianism and political corporatism.
Okay.
And if you don't mind me just catching up the audience real quick. So political corporatism is just thinking of the state as a body. That's all it is. It's not nefarious. As a matter of fact, it's kind of like the foundation of like politics for a really long time. But the flexible authoritarianism is the real problem with fascism, which basically says that whatever we need to do to maintain power and achieve our goals is what we will do. And so definitionally, when you have Donald Trump advocating for political corporatism with, America first, et cetera, and then he is willing to flaunt the norms of the republic, and I'm not even trying to be soy about it. He's just definitionally fascist.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, I don't disagree. Yeah, but well.
Well,
do you have any idea what Greenwald thinks about any of this? Have you read anything by him?
Glenn Greenwald, as far as I can see, because obviously I just catch his retweets on my timeline, he's just gone into the contrarian anti-statist circle jerk. So basically the powers that be can do no right. They're trapped in their own game. They're willing to sacrifice the youth of America and the youth of foreign nations in order to achieve their globo homo GDP based goals, and they think of us all as cattle.
Yeah.
But as a well-fed cow with a decent amount of personal success who has served in the past, I think that the American empire being similar to Rome historically is actually kind of based.
Okay. Well, any other final parting thoughts or anything else you want to contribute to this?
No, I'm happy. You and Turkey Tom are boys. He seems like a fun guy. And then, if I find something that I think you and I can bicker about, I will hit you up so we can scream at each other in a more dramatic fashion.
Okay. I love you. Be careful.
I love you too. Bye.
Bye.
It's me.
Oh, hi.
How are you?
Pretty good. Okay. I'm just curious. So my assertion is essentially that January 6th was a full-on insurrection attempt by Donald J. Trump that ended up failing for a variety of reasons. That's like my broad claim. Do you agree or disagree with that broad claim?
Totally disagree. Could not disagree more. We could start with this. Mm-hmm. Had there not been a riot on January 6th, let's say that it was for some reason a storm came and no one showed up, or they showed up but no one marched to the Capitol and they all went home, would you still say it's an insurrection?
Attempted, yeah.
So it didn't matter if the people showed up January 6th or not. The mere fact that Trump was, suggesting through Mike Pence to, challenge the electors and things like that, that on its own right is an insurrection.
Yeah. Well, unless insurrection is maybe it would just be a coup. I don't know if insurrection is defined as violence or something. I don't know. But then I would just call it a coup, I guess, whatever name you would call it. But an attempt to subvert the legal transfer of power, yeah, or the peaceful transfer of power.
Okay, so for the sake of right now, we won't focus on the term insurrection. Would it suffice to say, regardless if you call it a coup, insurrection, you think that would be reason enough to hold him legally accountable in some way to not leave him run again? Would that be a fair statement?
Maybe. I don't have as strong an opinion on that. I'll probably leave that to the Supreme Court. I'm not as interested in that. I'm more interested in just I'm not on the 14th Amendment stuff right now.
Okay. So just, you would say in general, if you're giving a message to voters, and it looks like the election's likely to be between Biden and Trump, you would let it be known that you think that the actions Trump took, even if it doesn't meet a legal threshold to keep him off a ballot, you would say to those voters, this was an attempted coup, insurrection, or whichever one of those words you would want to use.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so I guess to start with, then to meet that threshold, you're well aware that people have challenged electors in the past. Do you think any of those other attempts to challenge electors in the past rose to the level of a coup or insurrection or whatever word you want to use?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay, so what is it? So challenging electors is legitimate in your eyes. What was it specifically about what Trump did that took it over that threshold of the numerous times in the past when others have challenged electors?
I think it was Donald Trump trying to use this Eastman legal theory that Pence could unilaterally toss certain types of electors in certain states to throw the election to the House or whatever is something unique that I've never heard of any other president doing in the history of the United States.
Well, just now, let me be totally honest with you, just so you and your audience understands this. I do this as a hobby, so I don't have necessarily time to get deep dives into every single topic. I like to focus more on, like, the FBI investigations into various groups, Trump group, Hillary group. So I will concede from the outset that I'm not the most well-read in a lot of this stuff. So in particular, exactly what this Eastman theory is, I'm unaware. However, as someone who's admitting my lack of in-depth knowledge of that, one of the things you said there would seem to challenge the idea that this was a coup or an insurrection, which was that there was a potential legal theory. And even if you disagree with that legal theory or think it would be ruled unconstitutional or abusive, how can we say someone engaged in a coup for attempting, at least on paper, what they're saying is a legal theory?
I think that we can conceive of certain legal ways that we would still say that this is a coup. Just because even if there was a legal theory to support it, I don't think that by definition means that it's not a coup attempt.
So can you explain to me, I know you're not a lawyer, I don't know how well read you are onto what this Eastman theory is, but can you explain it to me in a nutshell? Obviously, I'm not asking you to cite any cases or anything like that necessarily, but in a nutshell, what was his theory that he was trying to do with Eastman?
Let me find it exactly, but my understanding was, before I Google this, my understanding was that Eastman, I think, was claiming that I think Pence could unilaterally toss the electors of 7 particular states, and that if Pence unilaterally tossed these electors, that it would make it so that there wasn't enough of a margin for the Electoral College. There was a majority for the Electoral College to vote for Trump, and that if that was the case, it could be tossed to the House. I think a House committee, and then because there were enough Republicans on the House committee, theoretically, you'd slam the gravel, I think you said, and Trump would remain president.
Yeah, I could be wrong. This is from my way back in my debate years in college. I do think that it goes to the states, it goes to the House, and I believe the tie-breaking vote would be the Speaker of the House, if I'm not mistaken. It is how it works. So I think each House would. I could be wrong about this, but my understanding is that it goes to each state's House, and then they vote, and then that's like one vote for each state. And so if Trump would have got 26 states, which I believe he would have, correct? Then that would give him the presidency.
Basically, because there were 26 Republican House delegates, and I think there were 24 Democrat ones, so they wouldn't even need the tiebreaker.
Okay, you're right, exactly. Because we had this crazy debate argument back in policy debate that somehow it would get kicked to the House, and then it would be 25-25, and then I think it was Speaker Hastert at the time would cast it. It was a stupid game of debate in college, but I remember this, right? So the point I would make then is, I don't understand, you would not dispute that the Constitution declares that it goes back to the problem's not that it would go back to the states. You say that's constitutional. That would be fine, correct?
Yep.
It's just the problem that he wanted Mike Pence to unilaterally do it. That's what you have the problem with?
Yeah, they had 7 states picked out where they were going to claim that they were like dual slates of electors that were sent to the Senate, and that he could use this to just toss these completely. And then that would be, because there wouldn't be a majority in the EC, they could toss it back to the House, and then the House would basically declare Trump the winner of the presidency.
Okay, so then I guess my issue then with your stance on, I actually don't have a big issue in this sense. If you're not suggesting some sort of legal remedy, like kicking him off the ballot, To me, it's not very important whether or not you or anyone else wants to say, technically, I think this was a coup, or technically, I think it was an insurrection. The problem I have is when it crosses into a legal threshold that would say, well, because of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, then he's not allowed on a ballot. If you're not really advocating for that, then I guess my primary argument would be like, shit, I don't care. If you want to call that a coup, that's fine. I would say I wouldn't call it a definition of a coup or an insurrection or any other term similar, because using attempted legal theories, even if I find those theories egregious, wouldn't rise to the level of what I would normally consider a coup, which would be obvious illegal actions designed to entrench yourself in power or to remove the sitting legitimate case from power.
Do you really think that the legality part is important for it to be a coup?
Yes.
Okay,
absolutely.
Here's a question then. Let's say that Joe Biden issues an executive order, and Joe Biden says, I declare by executive order that I shall remain president for the remainder of my life, and then when I die, that presidency is going to pass to my son. And let's say that this gets challenged, and I don't know, I guess obviously Congress or somebody would challenge this. It would go to the Supreme Court. Let's say that as it goes to the Supreme Court, let's say Joe Biden says, actually, I'm going to nominate 80 people that I think are going to rule in my favor. I'm going to nominate 80 judges to the Supreme Court. And let's say that the majority Senate is like, yeah, fuck it, let's do it. And then they approve those 80 new Supreme Court justices. And then the Supreme Court defends Joe Biden's executive action. It's like, not only, yeah, do we defend this? We think the president can act, let's say they rule very widely. The president can say whatever he wants to be executive order. At that point, would you say that that's a coup? Or since every single step of that was legal, would you say, oh no, well, that's not a coup. He followed the process the whole time?
No, I would say that's a coup.
Why?
But I think that, well, two reasons. One, I think there's a threshold argument. I think that's clearly far up.
Or, I'm sorry, yeah. Real quick. I'm sorry. Actually, finish it. When you say two things, I just want to go point by point. So make your argument for the threshold argument, okay?
Okay, right. So the threshold argument would be that there's clearly a limit where we could say that trying a theory that is a legal theory is one thing, even if we find it egregious or it's something that we wouldn't necessarily agree with. Having a system of things that are so out of bounds, obviously with the intent of the Constitution, that literally relies on one person, in this case the president, declaring himself like president for life, and then passing it through an executive order, and then having, which would be blatantly unconstitutional, but a bunch of judges and things like that going along with it, or Democrats going along with, that crosses a threshold that's different than challenging a legal theory that's been on par with a challenge that's been issued before. So there have been successful slates of alternate electors in the past, and just saying, well, this time having Mike Pence be the one to do it is what I find a coup. I think that is threshold clearly different than what you're suggesting.
So you think that if we go by, let's just like ignore all of the particulars, you think the idea that the president of the United States contacting the vice president to toss out electors for no good reason, to try to entrench his power as president of the United States in opposition to the will of the United States voting public, you think that's within the spirit of the Constitution or any set of U.S. laws?
Well, the way you phrased it, not necessarily, because you added things, like you said, no good reason.
Correct. Do you think that Trump had any good reason to think that the electors were falsified from the states?
Well, I think he had good reason to believe that the election was stolen from him.
Wait. Very, very, very specific. He might have thought that. He challenged that in court, and he lost all 61 times or whatever. My question was for the electors, did he have a reason to think that the states sent false electors?
Well, no, my belief, correct me if I'm wrong, it's not that he legitimately thought the state sent false electors. That's never the argument or the legal challenge.
Well, but that was the legal challenge. The legal challenge was to toss the electors, not challenge them in the states, but to toss the electors. So he thought that he lost in the courts, and now he wants to toss the electors. You think that's within the spirit of the U.S. Constitution and our laws?
Now, maybe I'm misunderstanding you, but it sounds like you're asking two different questions here. The first question, it seemed to me, was, do I literally think that Donald Trump sitting in the Oval Office gets a list of, like, a bunch of fake names or something? It's like, John Big and stuff like that, and he's like, I don't know, this could be the real electors. No, I don't believe that. I believe he knew which were the slate of electors that were point through the states and which were the slate of electors that were alternates. I believe he knew that difference. The question is, I'm saying that's not really what's at stake here. What's at stake is he legitimately thought that the election was stolen from him, that there was cheating, and so he suggested alternate slates of electors that would then kick it back to look at the actual things that occurred in these states to have the states look at them. So in other words,
wait, okay, real quick. I understand what you're saying. That wasn't the plan, right? So just reading very quickly. So this was the Eastman scenario that was proposed from the Eastman memo. 1, VP Pence presiding over the joint session, or Senate Pro Tempore Grassley, as Pence recuses himself, so either him or Grassley, begins to open and count the ballots, starting with Alabama, without conceding that the procedures specified by the Electoral Count Act of going through the states alphabetically is required. 2, when he gets to Arizona, he announces that he has multiple slates of electors, and so is going to defer decision on that until finishing the other states. This would be the first break with the procedures set out in the act. So he's already admitting that they're breaking the ECA. 3, at the end, he announces that because of the ongoing disputes of the 7 states, there are no electors that can be deemed validly appointed in those states. That means that the total number of electors appointed, the language of the 12th Amendment, is 454. This reading of the 12th Amendment has also been advanced by Harvard Law professor Lawrence Tribe here. A majority of the electors appointed would therefore be 228. There are, at this point, 232 votes for Trump, 222 for Biden. Pence then gavels President Trump as reelected. Number 4, Howell's, of course, from the Democrats, who now claim, contrary to Tribe's prior position, that 270 is required. So Pence says, fine, pursuant to the 12th Amendment, no candidates achieved the necessary majority. That sends the matter to the House, where the, quote, votes shall be taken by states, the representation from each state having 1 vote, end quote. Republicans currently control 26 of the state delegations. The bare majority needed to win that vote. President Trump is reelected here as well. There are 2 other points, but so the goal here was never to throw it back to the states to evaluate the integrity of their elections. The goal here was to use the Electoral Count Act and the process of counting the electoral votes to make Donald Trump the president.
Let me ask you this. Those 2 other points, do any of those points mention the states verifying the vote tallies that they recorded?
Let me read them. 5, one last piece. Assuming the Electoral Count Act process is followed, and upon getting the objections to the Arizona slates, the 2 houses break into their separate chambers, we should not allow the Electoral Count Act constraint on debate to control. That would mean that a prior legislature was determining the rules of the present one, a constitutional no-no, as Tribe has forcibly argued. So someone, Ted Cruz, Rand Paul, etc., should demand normal rules, which include the filibuster. That creates a stalemate that could give the state legislatures more time to weigh in to formally support the alternate slate of electors if they had not already done so. And then 6, the final point, the main thing here is that Pence should do this without asking for permission, either from a vote of the joint session or from the court. Let the other side challenge his actions in court, where Tribe, who in 2001 conceded the president of the Senate might be in charge of counting the votes, and others who would press a lawsuit would have their past position that these are non-justiciable political questions thrown back at them to get the lawsuit dismissed. The fact is that the Constitution assigns this power to the vice president as the ultimate arbiter. We should take all of our actions with that in mind. So no, I don't think any of this has anything to do with actually verifying the votes in the states.
Okay, so quickly, so that we'll get to, so there's 2 things I wanted to focus on. The first is, right, what this seems to suggest is these alternate slates of electors, for example, the first state that it mentioned, I believe, was Arizona. These would be states that people in those states were claiming that they thought there were legitimate questions with the election that wasn't resolved. Now, you could disagree with that. You could say, well, the courts looked at it and determined that wasn't the case. That's not what happened. Most of these court decisions said that there was no standing. It didn't say we've looked at the facts of the case and determined that there was no fraud.
So that's incorrect. I believe about 30 of these cases lost on evidentiary grounds. So when people say they were lost on standing, what they really mean is they didn't even make it to trial because prima facie, the Giuliani and his associates and his cronies couldn't even provide any evidence to even get it to court. They weren't all lost on standing. 30 of them were lost on evidentiary grounds.
Well, for example, let's take Arizona. There were questions of the Arizona audit that went for years after this. We're talking about Pence doing this on January 6th. So the election occurs in November. So we're talking like 3 months. So the idea that the courts legitimately saw all the evidence. Now you could say, but Rudy Giuliani made a bunch of shit up, and that could be true. Like, here's the truth. Let's see if you agree with it. This is difficult to do because I understand we both want to take this in different directions. Can I just ask you a couple of real quick rapid fire questions?
If it's to do with election fraud, we can do that after if you want. But right now, I'm just looking at the attempted coup attempt via Pence.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the question is this. Do you believe Trump legitimately thought that there was fraud?
No.
You don't? You think he made it up?
100%.
Okay, well, we disagree on that fact, right? Do you think that I think my belief is that there was easily fraud, that there's fraud in every election. So the question is, did the fraud rise to the level? And clearly the impetus is on the people accusing. I won't disagree with you there, and I will tell you right now, I have not seen smoking gun evidence that there was fraud that would have changed the results of the election.
Sure. And but real quick, we can get to that. We can get to that. I just want to very quickly focus on, because I believe that this part alone, with literally nothing else mattering, arises to easily the level of a coup. If the president thought that there was electoral, fraud or whatever, he has the ability to remedy that by challenging it to the courts. And if the president wants to certify the electoral votes or of the electoral college or whatever, he wants to do that certification of the process. He also, as dumb as I think it is, he has the right to do that as well, which they did. But this idea here of Pence unilaterally trying to abuse this process to throw out 7 states because of this alternate elector thing is, I don't know how this just isn't a coup attempt. It just literally is.
Okay, so I'll just say real quick, I think that there was a reason for these states to say that things weren't resolved in places like Arizona, Georgia. There's still discussion going on in places like Georgia. But dispense with that for now, and let's go to the last part that you talked about. So your problem seems to be, look, it's all right to question. It's all right to say, was there fraud? Is it all right to bring lawsuits? But the problem that's outrageous here is Mike Pence unilaterally acting.
Yeah. Because Arizona and all these other states, they went through and they certified their EC and their electoral votes, and then they, continued on.
But it seems like even in the memo here, and I assume this Eastman memo is from Trump's team, correct? That you're reading from?
I think Eastman, because Trump started to get desperate and looked for crazy people to support his shit. Yeah, Eastman is one of them.
Now, even he's suggesting what the remedy will end up being. It'll go to the courts. So the idea that this would just unilaterally be like, that they would just say, 26 states are red states, that means Trump's president, end of game. That's clearly not what have happened. What they were trying to do was they felt that they weren't given a fair opportunity to present all of this evidence in courts. You might say that's bullshit, but that was what they felt. And so they said,
that's fine. Wait, I agree that you can have that feeling that you didn't get a fair day in court, you lost. That's fine. Mm-hmm. That's perfectly valid. You can have that. You can even say that. I feel like the courts fucked us. That's fine. But it's a step too far now when you're telling the vice president, well, listen, since I think we got court, let's throw out the election results and buy more time. How is that not a coup?
Right, but what even their team said, the way you made it seem was like, well, that'll be it then. Then there's no remedy in Trump's president.
We're not talking about, he could coup and extend his leadership by 6 months and it would still be a successful coup, right? Whether this would have lasted or survived the courts or whatever, who knows, whatever else, isn't really relevant. What happens later is not relevant at all. What the point was that he was trying to circumvent the EC process by having Pence unilaterally toss slates of electors and then use a thing that I think even he himself says, Eastman even says in here that it's probably not constitutional.
But I mean, we see presidents do things all the time unilaterally that they don't know if they're constitutional or blatantly are saying aren't constitutional.
Sure. I'm trying to avoid real quick the whataboutisms here, but
I'm not doing about it. I'm just saying these are the processes that occur a lot. And it's not just presidents. We've seen this with political parties. So the point
I'll ask, can you give me an example in the last 20 or 30 years of a president trying to, for instance, if all presidents did this all the time, why didn't Gore just toss the votes for Bush or whatever after the huge election scandal or big fighting over?
Well, you misunderstand. I'm not saying it's just over elections. For example, Biden all but admitted he knew that his student loan decree, giving people student loan money back, wouldn't pass the courts. He knew it, but he did it anyways.
Yeah, but that's not a coup. That's not. We're just talking about.
Well, it would be unconstitutional. So the difference is you would say that's still unconstitutional. It's just because it wasn't directly affecting who won an election, you don't consider it a coup.
That's not even, I'm not going to go over every single thing that we might think is violative of the Constitution. That's okay.
But right, fair enough. But what I'm just saying is it seems the people that are trying to make this argument and say that it's a coup and go even further than you, saying that there needs to be some legal remedy to keep Trump off the ballot.
Well, I think there should be a legal remedy. That's why I support the DC case against Trump. I think he should be held for the fraudulently trying to take the vote away from the American public, for sure. But we can get to that part next. But I'm just saying right now, can we agree that this is obviously a coup attempt?
No, I don't think it's obviously a coup for the reasons that, let me ask you this question. What if we would find out tomorrow? What if Raffensperger comes out in Georgia and says, actually, Trump did win Georgia. We f***ed up. Then what? Is it still a coup?
No. You would go back and you would redo that process. But whether he does or doesn't change the fact that Donald Trump is trying to use the vice president to toss out EC votes.
Well, I understand that, right? But the tossing out of the votes would cause a sort of Supreme Court to intervene or courts to intervene, which would then have action. Isn't it true? And I'm going to leave you look this up because I'm sort of talking out my ass here. As I've already admitted, I'm not the biggest scholar into these things. Did they not change the law afterwards to ensure that the vice president can't do this?
I think they clarified the language essentially, yeah.
Okay, well, the fact that it required a clarification and there was a legal argument that this would have been in Pence's authority would seem to suggest to me that this isn't a coup.
No, it wouldn't. First of all,
totally disagree.
That's fine, but you literally earlier just said that if you were to load the courts and try to secure power that way, you would consider that to be a coup, even though there's expressly nothing about like having more Supreme Court justices in the Supreme Court, right? I'm not crazy, right? I'm pretty sure we've changed the number of Supreme Court justices over time. So there would be even more precedents for Biden packing the court than there would be for whatever this is, which has never been attempted in all of U.S. history.
But that's true, but that wasn't your scenario. It wasn't just adding people to the court. It was basically executive order declaring himself president for life, then packing the court to ensure that happens. That clearly crosses a threshold that is obviously different than even just adding members to the court.
I agree with you that would be a clear crossing of the threshold, but every single part of that would be legal. I'm not even sure if you could make a law to make that illegal. Could you?
What do you mean? Make a law to make what illegal? The packing of the court and declaring yourself president for life?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that clearly, but again, I'm no constitutional scholar. I think that clearly the Constitution gives remedies for, and the amendments thereafter, for what a presidential term's allowed to be and what sort of the processes are to sort of change the way we vote and things like that.
Sure. But again, I mean, like the Supreme Court is the ultimate arbiter of everything from the Constitution. That is our sole source of interpretation for it. So the Supreme Court says, actually, because of national emergency and risk to the country and blah, 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 we're going to say the president can issue an EO for this. Then that's all legal.
You could say it's legal, but I would still consider it a coup, and I think that the threshold of it is far worse than what Trump did here.
Asking the vice president to toss the election results? I don't understand how we can't say that this is just so obviously a coup attempt. The president is, like, if Biden were to do this, I think he would call this a coup. If Biden told Kamala Harris, hey, listen, we're just going to not certify the results of like 7 states and then throw it back to the House and have like an advantage, if we had an advantage there and do it, I think he would call this a coup.
No, not if they ended up, the result went to courts and we saw the evidence that if there was no cheating, then the results would go back to the person that won.
Wait, so you think that right now this is only a coup if it turns out that all of Arizona and Georgia is infinitely investigated and it turns out that there is no issue? But if it turns out that there were problems, then this coup attempt is okay because he couped righteously and he ended up being correct, even though he has no reason.
No, I'm not calling it a coup. I think it would rise to the level of a coup if they did this, and then the courts intervened, as is predicted apparently by this Eastman memo. The courts intervened, looked at it, and said, look, we've looked at it. We see no evidence of fraud. We declare that Joe Biden is the legitimate winner. And then Trump still said, no, I'm not leaving. That's a coup.
I don't believe, none of the court or Supreme Court challenging anything has to do with the merits of the actual election itself. It's literally just over this electoral college process. None of this is being talked about and challenging anything in court anymore about whether the elections were rigged. It's just over this process of using Pence to unilaterally declare Trump the president.
My understanding from, I'm not reading it, but from listening to you read it, was that they thought that this would go to the courts, and I believe that the courts would have ultimately determined not just whether or not Pence had the right to do this, but the courts would have looked at and saw whether or not the votes were legitimate or not. If that wouldn't have occurred, let's say that you're right.
Wait. The way that what this is talking about for point 6 here, the main thing here is that Pence should do this without asking for permission, either from a vote of the joint session or from the court. Let the other side challenge his actions in court, where Tribe, who in 2001 conceded the president of the Senate might be in charge of counting the votes, and others who would press a lawsuit would have their past position that these are non-justiciable political questions thrown back at them to get the lawsuit dismissed. This is just saying that, like, they would argue that, like, Pence can do whatever the he wants in the Senate, and if they try to challenge it in court, well, guess what? These issues actually can't even be ruled on by the Supreme Court. None of this is about fairly contesting whether the election was rigged in anything. It has nothing.
I believe, and from what I've heard about this, and what I believe the obvious path that would have occurred had this occurred, would have been that the courts would have interceded and they would have looked at what they saw as evidence of potential fraud in these swing states and would have came to a conclusion as to whether or not those votes were legitimate or not. I believe that's how it would have played out.
You can say that, but none of this theory has anything to do with that. Because if that were true, you wouldn't have Vice Pence throwing out electoral college votes. You would just continue your challenges in court. Like,
but
if you'd already
in court weren't being heard.
No, but they were. Again, 30 of them lost on the merits. And if they weren't being heard, why? If you didn't have standing and they weren't being heard, why would delaying the election change that?
Because the argument is because it would then force the reason. The idea, like, and let me just say this, just to sort of let you know where I understand. I'm actually against Mike Pence ever taking this action. I'm glad that he didn't, even if I think there were serious things that potential fraud that occurred, I don't think that we should have left it up to Mike Pence. I think you're absolutely right in saying I would have been hypocritical if in 2016, then Vice President Biden said, we think Russia interfered. We don't think these votes are legit, so we're not going to hand over power yet. I would have said it was outrageous. I wouldn't have said it was a coup unless they ultimately stayed in power. But I would have you're absolutely right. I would have been going livid. I would have been on stream every day saying this is fucking outrageous, right? Like Trump legitimately won. So I understand that point of it. The question is, does it rise to the level of a coup? And I think the fact that there are potential legal theories that say that they were legally allowed to do these things says to me that it doesn't rise to the level of a coup. I think that what would have happened...
To be clear, real quick, there is no legal theory truly that would allow this to happen. Like, all of this is talking about circumventing ordinary process. Like, this is the Eastman theory for how it would play out in Congress, but at no point does Eastman lay out a coherent... Even Eastman himself doesn't acknowledge that this is a coherent legal argument for how to do this. It's just taking an incredibly extreme view that basically, like, the vice president is like the big boy of the Senate and can do whatever the fuck he wants unilaterally. That's why in this last point he literally says, the fact is that the Constitution assigns its power to the vice president as the ultimate arbiter. We should take all of our actions with that in mind, which is clearly not the intention of any of the ECA or any part of the Constitution to make the vice president able to unilaterally toss election results.
I mean, again, I'm just doing not claiming to be an expert here, but just a quick search, right? I'm getting an article from PBS NewsHour. This is from December 23rd, 2022. Congress approves new election certification rules in response to January 6th. Congress on Friday gave final passage to an election, blah, blah, blah. It was bipartisan. Biden held the provisions, including in the bill, a statement calling it critical bipartisan action that will help ensure the will of the people is preserved. It's the most significant legislative response yet to Trump's aggressive efforts to upend the popular vote, and a step that's been urged by the House Select Committee. The provisions amending the 1887 law, which have long been criticized as poorly and confusingly written, won bipartisan support and would make it harder for future presidential losers to prevent the ascension of their foes. So to me, it doesn't seem like the law is as clear as you're leading on, that it was like, clearly this is something that they had no...
No, hold on, wait. We're so lost in the weeds right now. Hold on. Okay. I agree with you that the wording was vague and weird and dumb, like some of our old laws are. But in terms of, like, spirit of the law, it is incredibly clear and obvious that the vice president should not be allowed to unilaterally toss electors from states for the president. That is so unbelievably clear that the vice president should not be able to do that.
I would have to read the 1887 law. We could do that if you want. But again, I think that it is not beyond the pale to say that there is a legitimate legal criticism that this was an action that could potentially take place.
I said I'd grant you, even if it was an action that could take place, it is clearly in the spirit of our democracy a coup. It would be against the stated procedure of the states voting for a president, electors being sent to the Senate, and then them being certified. It would be clearly against the spirit of the United States Constitution to allow the president to tell the vice president that he didn't like the election results and to throw them out. That would clearly be against, like, that would...
So just to be clear, if a state decided that they were going to unilaterally usurp the will of the state and say, we're going to have an alternate slate of electors, but it never went through the president telling the vice president to accept those, you would say that's not a coup by the members of that particular state that put forth the alternate electors?
If they had a legitimate reason for doing so, then I would say that that they apparently have that right afforded to them. But I don't believe that the spirit of any of these processes are just, you can toss the electors if you don't like the results of the election.
Well, but therein's the rub, right? Legitimate reason, right? Says who?
Says the courts.
Oh, so then your interpretation. So then you would have to leave the courts decide then whether or not it's legitimate or not. So then presumably you're saying if there were an alternate slate of electors, the process that would likely incur would be that the courts would look at it and see if there was a legitimate reason. How would they determine if there was a legitimate reason?
I don't know, analysis of the law? Or what are you talking about, legitimate reason for rigged election or legitimate reason for them to simply toss the votes? Because
let's say
my understanding right now, by the way, is that, like, I'm pretty sure, I think there are states that don't have faithless elector laws, meaning you could literally send your electors to the House or the Senate, or however, I don't know, wherever the fuck they go to solidify or certify their vote for the president or whatever, where they could just, like, vote in discordance with what their population voted for. I don't know which states have faithless elector laws, but I would say that would be like a coup attempt as well. Like, if you just go to Congress, you're like, oh, I'm just going to vote in total opposition to my population because we don't have a law for it. I would say that's an attempted coup if you're trying to do something that is clearly circumventing the process, the obvious process of how it's supposed to go.
Right, but what you just said before that, right now you're sort of switching the scenario, which is like, well, clearly if they just know they're full of shit and for no reason to like, we don't like that guy, right? I get it. We're not talking about that. You said it wouldn't be considered a coup, and forget about the faithless elector state. Let's just say an average state that has the laws that like we understand that says that whoever the will of the people vote for, that's who the electors are then thusly determined to be forced to put forth. If a state, let's say in 2024 election, let's just take a state like Washington, the state, well, how about Oregon? We'll take the state of Oregon, right? And let's say the state of Oregon votes for the Republican candidate and it's a Democrat-controlled state, and they're like, fuck that. We think that there was all sorts of shenanigans, tampering with the voting machines and shit, so we're going to put forth different electors that are Democrat electors. You say, well, to determine whether or not that would be a coup by that state or the officials in that state, it would require to say that whether or not there was legitimate reason for them to change those electors.
No, I would disagree. I would just call that. I would call that a coup or improper, or whatever. A delay.
So that's happened. So then every
I
time
don't think you can transmit different electors just because you're not happy with how the election are. Even if you have proof, the way to remedy that is through the courts. And if you lose in court, then you just have to go along with the process. Because if you don't get the answer you like in court, well then what, Rob? Do we just let people determine like, well, I think the court is lying and I think I'm right, so I'm going to transmit totally different electors? Is that the system that you want?
Not necessarily, but the point is...
Wait, not necessarily. Would you want that?
Right.
Wait, I'm sorry. Okay, you said that it's been done before.
Correct.
When?
So I'll look it up here, but you are aware that alternate electors have been used before, and you just gave the rationale that each time it would be a coup.
Or tampering with the peaceful transfer of power. I don't know if one state doing it would necessarily be a coup, because I don't even know if they would, but maybe an attempt at, I'm not sure. But you said that it's happened in the past because they thought the election was rigged, or were there issues with the electors, or what?
Well, we'll get to that. We could look into the specifics, but that wouldn't matter based on the rationale you just gave. The rationale you just gave was, hey, if there was a problem, the courts would have figured it out. If you didn't get the remedy in court, you still have to put through the electors. You wouldn't want a system where states could just put forth alternate electors. That's what you said. So it doesn't matter what their rationale was. Even if they had the best rationale.
Wait, no. Hold on. No. There could be good rationale. For instance, if they felt like when the electors had transmitted their stuff, that like somebody like tampered with what the electors mailed in or something, right? So they're like, well, hold on, we think that this elector vote was compromised or something had gone wrong here. But the issue with the election itself, that's done and passed. That's not the time where the electors are supposed to be transmitting the results. If you want to challenge the results of the election, you do that through the courts or through your electoral system or whatever. But once you've done that, then you have to transmit the electors as your state voted.
So just to be clear, you're saying that right now the only example you've given for where alternate electors would be legitimate and wouldn't be considered a coup would be if literally there's a potential problem like, the Pony Express.
Yeah, with the actual electors.
Telegraph.
That would be my understanding, yes.
Okay, I don't think that's ever occurred.
Okay. Yeah, well, let's look into a time when electors, what's like an example of electors not being transmitted or states transmit different electors or whatever.
All right. So this website's justsecurity.org. I have no idea what that is.
Justsecurity.org? Okay, sorry.
Yes. Edward B. Foley in July 7th, 22.
Edward B. Foley, July 7th, 2022. Okay.
Correct.
And I'm looking for, give me something Google. I'm just trying to find the page or whatever.
How about in 1876, South Carolina?
Oh, no, wait. Just give me one example of this. I'm trying to figure out.
Okay. Well, I was just giving you a word. The title of the article is A Historical Perspective on Alternate Electors, Lessons from Hayes Teeden.
Okay, a historical perspective on alternate electors.
Correct.
Okay, just security.
I haven't read this yet. I just literally Googled, and here's two examples of alternate electors.
Okay, cool.
I have so you could start at South Carolina if you want to, or I could read it. Doesn't matter.
I can read it. Okay, I'll try to do this quick, okay? Okay. I'll just start at the top, okay? A key component of the effort to negate Joe Biden's Electoral College victory in the hope that it might somehow lead to a second term for President Donald Trump was a submission for congressional consideration of reported electoral votes cast for Trump from 7 battleground states. It was, among other tactics, a fool's errand, since there never was a chance that Congress was going to recognize Trump as the winner. Joe Biden won the popular vote in all these states, as recounts and lawsuits had uniformly confirmed. The actual electors appointed in these states, pursuant to state law, based on the outcome of the state's popular vote, were those pledged to support Biden, and these electors dutifully cast their ballots for Biden and properly proceeded to send their votes to Congress to be counted on January 6, 2021, as required by the Constitution's 12th Amendment. In contrast, the supposed electoral votes cast for Trump had no official status in any of the states because no institution of state government recognized Trump, rather than Biden as having won the popular vote in that state. Mike Pence, as Senate President, would not even let these pro-Trump submissions be open in the joint session of Congress because, without any claim of any backing from any part of the state's government, they could not be acknowledged as even asserting to be official electoral votes entitled to be considered by Congress. Since then, the question has arisen whether anyone should be criminally prosecuted in connection with these submissions of groundless pro-Trump electoral votes. As part of considering this question, it is worth comparing an historical example in which self-proclaimed electoral votes were sent to and considered by Congress. The historical episode sheds light on the answer to how the criminal law should be wielded to address the schemes to overturn the 2020 election. Now, the first example given is South Carolina in 1876. In 1876, South Carolina was one of 3 southern states that quickly became disputed after the popular vote had been cast in November. Florida and Louisiana were the other 2. The Republican candidate Rutherford Hayes needed all 3 of these states for an electoral college victory, whereas Samuel Tilden needed just 1. Tilden's position was strongest in Florida. In fact, an honest count of ballots cast would have shown Tilden the state's winner. His party's state of electors in Florida also met on the congressionally designated day for all electors in every state to cast their electoral college votes. But unlike in South Carolina, as we shall focus on momentarily, Tilden's Florida electors were backed by an official of the state's government, Florida's Attorney General, a Democrat, who purported to certify Tilden the winner of the state. On the same day, however, Republican electors in Florida voted for Hayes, backed by a certification from the state's canvassing board that Hayes had won the state as a consequence of the board's dishonest counting of the ballots. Later, Florida's judiciary and legislature would act to undo the canvassing board certification in favor of Hayes, and additional official documentation of Tilden's popular vote victory in the state would be sent to Congress to supplement the Attorney General's initial declaration of this result. Tilden's status in Louisiana was much weaker than in Florida, although it was superior to his standing in South Carolina. In Louisiana, there was a dispute not only over who won the presidential vote there, but also who was the lawful governor of the state. The Grant administration was backing the Republican claimant, who certified that Hayes had won the state's popular vote for president. The Democrat claiming to be governor, by contrast, certified that Tilden won the state. In South Carolina, by contrast, there was no one with any colorable claim of official authority in any position or in a position to certify Tilden the winner. Still, Democrats there were claiming that they had won. Their main argument was the state lacked a voter registration law, even though the state's constitution required one. Unlike in Florida, Tilden supporters could not reasonably claim that more of the popular votes actually cast in the state were for him rather than Hayes. Nonetheless, Tilden's electors met and voted for him on the congressional designated day for electoral college balloting. They submitted their spurious electoral votes to the Senate President pursuant to the 12th Amendment, as though they, rather than the Hayes electors, were entitled to cast the state's official electoral college votes. And their submission, which was labeled in the joint session of Congress held to receive the votes in the 1876 election as certificate number 2 from the state, certificate number 1 being the one submitted in favor of Hayes, the Tilden electors declared themselves as being electors duly and legally appointed by and for the state of South Carolina, as will hereinafter appear. They acknowledged their submission was not signed by the governor and that the seal of the state as affixed thereto as required by law is not attached. They continued in absence. Its absence is explained by the following statement. They then proceeded to recount the grounds on which they thought themselves, rather than the Hayes electors, entitled to be considered the true electors for the state. Okay. So before we go further into this, it sounds like the confusion here had to do with the fact that, like, at least for this state and for the others, there's confusion over like who even has the authority to transmit electors. My understanding is that in the 7 battleground states, I don't think any of these confusions existed, right?
Well, no, none of the confusions that are being outlined there that you're talking about do, but the central issue of why the Democrats, who knew that they didn't have the authority but yet still cast alternate electors, was that they felt that the election was stolen from them because the enacting of restricting of voting laws.
Sure, but I mean, like, we've got 2 huge points here. One is that it does seem like there might be maybe some, I don't know, like, how secure the elections or whatever at this point, but it seems like who has the authority to transmit these things, I guess in this state where people were saying there wasn't even a valid governor or whatever, didn't even exist at the time. So, like, there is some question here of who even has the authority to do it. And then 2, the Electoral Count Act, I don't even think was passed by the time that this election happened, so I'm not even sure if there would be a law regulating this yet. But, like, this type of dispute is way different than, like, we're going to obviously try to lie and get things tossed out unilaterally by the vice president, or that we're just going to lie about the vote totals. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
The term lie is sort of poisoning the well. That's not what anyone's suggesting.
Well, to be clear, that was the Eastman strategy, was to lie and say that the electors were illegitimate, and then to say, because the electors were legitimate. There was no denying that.
Nonetheless, the rationale that you gave when we walked through this was that other than literally like the Telegraph fucking up, that you're just like, no, we sent that Tilden won, but the Telegraph fucked it up and said that it was Hayes that won. Other than that, you said it would be a coup. So here's an example in South Carolina. Even if I give you credit to Louisiana and Florida and say, well, there was issues on who the legitimate governor was and who had the authority to put these, what this is clearly saying is in South Carolina, that dispute was not part of it.
When I said like the post had fucked up or whatever, what I'm hinting at here clearly, not hinting, I'm more or less saying it, is like a procedural issue. That's what I'm saying. Like the mail fucking up would be one thing. I can't even imagine another procedural issue. But that's because I didn't even know that in the history of the United States, I didn't know we had a state where people didn't even know there was a fucking governor. I never even knew that was possible. But that would be an example of like a procedural issue. But they're not sending different electors because they disagree with like the vote total, or they're trying to like do it's like, see, it seems like on procedure grounds, like this state didn't even have a fucking governor at the time where it was like disputed. I didn't even know that was a thing in U.S. history.
But again, I'm not talking about the examples they give from Florida and Louisiana. I'm talking about South Carolina, which is the issue that, and I'm not just saying me because I admitted I just searched this, right? But it's clear that it's even the header of this is titled the South Carolina. And what they're saying is, look, there were other states that there were actual reasonable shit. Like we didn't even know who the governor was. Totally get that. That's a totally different situation. What it's talking about specifically, though, is this South Carolina situation. It's saying there was no such dispute there. The only dispute was as follows. Democrats felt that the law, even though there was no claim that their candidate won the popular vote in the state, they felt that the laws disenfranchised certain voters. Therefore, their side should have been legitimately declared the winner because the law didn't allow the proper votes to be cast. That's remarkably similar to the claims that are being made by Trump's team, that they're saying it is our belief that the way that voting occurred was fraudulent or things occurred that were unacceptable, and so we are going to put forth an alternate slate of electors that will force these things to be looked at. I assume that was the Democrats' goal here in 1876. Their goal was, look, we want it looked at whether or not these particular type of voting laws should have been enacted and what that would have meant then. Would that have tilted the balance for one state to another? Now, I don't know. In the 1870s, Democrats, maybe the laws they're suggesting, I'm just guessing, are that people of certain colors that were former slaves or something like that voted, and perhaps they shouldn't have been allowed to vote. I'm not sure, but it sounds like they're saying that the laws on the books that determined who could vote or how votes were counted were illegitimate, and thus they put forth an alternate slate of react. Can you tell me why that wouldn't be?
Okay, I guess so. Maybe I can agree with you there, but I think like if you walked me through all of these, and if I agreed with you on every single point here, then I would just return to my earlier argument. Then, I would say, well, this is kind of like an attempted coup. Then, would I be incorrect there, or? Like, no, let's say that I agree at every point that, like, okay, well, they knew that they shouldn't have done this. They knew that they were lying the whole time. They knew that they were submitting false electors, and they knew they didn't have the authority to do this. Then I would say, you're basically breaking as many norms or rules as you possibly can to entrench your party's leadership for as long as possible. I would say that that's essentially like a coup. You're preventing the peaceful transfer of power.
Okay, well then the question would be, why were those coups that occurred, and these aren't the only examples, I haven't read in depth, but I know in 1960 in Hawaii there was an alternate slate of electors. In addition to that, when Trump won in 2016, there were Democrats that still are serving in Congress that suggested alternate slates of electors or not certifying the election. The question then becomes, why was the remedy for all of those people not to criminally charge those that were deemed alternate electors, not to boot out of office or criminally charge the people that were in office that suggested or attempted to do those alternate slate of electors? According to you, I don't know, but hold on, wait, hold on. I don't know why, but you can't seriously purport that since somebody wasn't charged, we couldn't consider this like a coup attempt. Well, I can when it comes to why this matters, right? Because the reason that this would matter to me is the obvious double standard. That when this occurred over and over again in the past, I don't really give a shit what you, a prominent streamer Destiny, calls something. I don't give a shit. What I care about is what our legal system does in response to it.
Well, and hold on. Well, did people at the time think this was an attempted coup? Were people at the time incredibly irritated?
I can't speak for 1867. I could say that when people in 2016, Democrats suggested not certifying the results or alternate electors, no.
Well, but it says like at the end here, but even this apparent criminality did not result in prosecutions and convictions of the perpetrators, but instead caused Tilden's political disgrace, preventing him from returning as the Democratic Party's presidential nominee in 1880, as had been his plan immediately after Hayes was inaugurated. So maybe most people at the time thought this was basically like, yeah, you were doing something illegal, you were trying to rig the election, it was an attempted coup.
That's fine. Then the remedy should be the same. The Republican Party could say that Trump is a disgrace and not nominate him. That's different than criminally charging him, criminally charging the people that were deemed alternate electors.
Well, hold on, we're not even we haven't even gotten to the criminal charging part yet. And also what's happened here is not as severe as what happened in what Trump attempted, I don't think, because Trump is working in contravention of an actual law, and here they were definitely violating the spirit of the Constitution. But the Electoral Commission, Congress literally created the Electoral Commission to settle this exact dispute. So,
well, fair enough. But the question, so you could say then the legal ramifications this time would be differently. But how do you handle then, I'm just saying that you would have to, by your own logic, consider these coups. And then how would you consider the time it was used, like in 1960 in Hawaii? That's clearly after the 1887 law.
Well, we can look at 1960. Well, we don't have to go over. We can just do, so 1960
Sure.
Hawaii, 1960 Hawaii, multiple electors. Okay.
This is what I'm reading of it. The
Hawaii
election.
Or I'm just reading the, I'm just looking at the wiki here. The election and the subsequent recount are notable for giving rise to the first occurrence of dueling electoral slates in American history since the 1887 enactment of the Electoral Count Act. During the 2000 United States presidential election recount in Florida, Congresswoman Patsy Mink suggested that the election could serve as a potential precedent to extend Vice President Al Gore's challenge to the official results beyond the Electoral Count Act's safe harbor deadline, though this was ultimately not acted upon. During the attempts to overturn the 2020 United States presidential election, the election was cited as a potential precedent by supporters of President Donald Trump, despite important differences, including the fact that the Hawaiian Democratic slate was certified by Governor Quinn. Even if the recounts in Hawaii succeeded in giving Nixon the state, Kennedy would still have won the presidency with 300 electoral votes to Nixon's 222.
Well, that's irrelevant.
So recount.
I'll just read what I'm reading here, right?
Okay.
It says, the Hawaii election was initially resulted in a narrow 140 vote victory for then Vice President Nixon. The margin was close enough for the court to order a recount, which was still going on December 19th, the deadline for presidential electors to meet and cast their ballot. The outcome of the recount would not affect the overall outcome of the race, already handily secured by John Kennedy. Still, Nixon's Hawaii electors happily abided by their duty to meet and cast their votes. This didn't stop Kennedy's Hawaii electors from casting their own votes for their candidate, despite Kennedy's initial defeat and the results of the recount pending. The recount ultimately reversed the state's results, awarding Kennedy an even narrower 115-vote win. The Kennedy electors subsequently reconvened to sign a new set of certifying documents, which Governor Bill Quint transmitted to Washington. In his duties as vice president, Nixon accepted the third and final count. While the attorneys for Georgia's defendants claim Hawaii case serves as a viable precedent, essentially upholding their assertion that the act of convening alternate electives is not itself illegal, Fulton County Attorney Fannie Willis rejected the assertion in a brief submitted to Fulton County Court, which is set to hear. In the brief, Willis summarily dismissed the comparison between the action of Georgia defendants and actions that did not result in prosecution 60 years ago in a different jurisdiction with different election code and criminal statutes. Willis highlighted crucial differences in the two cases so readily distinguishable. The differences are some she cited in 60 by December 19th, the date when Hawaii electors met. The Republican slate of electors had been certified by the governor based on the initial tally of votes, but due to the close margin of less than 150 vote, an official recount was ongoing. In the present case, when the defendant Latham and other fraudulent electors met, two recounts had already been completed, each of which confirmed a margin of victory for then candidate Biden. So the
wait, hold on.
is,
so real quick on this. So for the Hawaii thing, so it sounds like there was one set of electors that transmitted their thing because of what the vote was, and then a second set transmitted theirs because of an ongoing recount. I mean, I would argue that the unofficial guy shouldn't have done it, but the precedence here for them transmitting two sets is a lot stronger than for whatever the Trump's legal theory is, right? Because these guys' theory was that like there's a recount of like 140 vote difference and it could flip, and it did flip. But Trump's theory is that there's like unprecedented widespread like rigging they've already lost in the courts and they've already exhausted their legal challenges through. So what I don't understand like how these things are even comparable. I would say here they shouldn't have transmitted the second set. I think that was inappropriate, but definitely not comparable to Trump asking Pence to unilaterally throw it, or to a state. I'm sorry, you're not making that comparison. Or to a state just deciding to have a second set of electors who don't like the results of the first election.
So what I would say is that I think that you're definitely right that there's a stronger case in the Hawaii 1960 than there is, because the idea of an official recount going seems to buttress against, right? So I can see that, like I really do. However, I still think on the grounds of the legality that it would still be, if it's illegal for alternate electors in Trump's case, on paper, the law is the same. And if the law says by this date, the official certified government electors have to be put forth, I think having alternate electors would be illegal in the same way that it would be legal for Trump's team. Even if you say, but I deem their actions to be more reasonable. Like the reasonability of it doesn't seem to affect whether or not the letter of the law is followed,
I
correct?
think the intention is the really important part here.
Well, there's the rub. So by intention, what do you mean? So
As in the intention of the electors, like they can see that there's a recount. That's all the recounts for the presidential election were done before Pence and the certification ever happened. For here, the recount is still ongoing. Like I said, I don't think the second set of electors should have been transmitted. I don't know if there's ever been a case where the recount was ongoing, like when the votes needed to be counted, or if this is like a one-off thing. Because this was saying that the recount was still ongoing on December 19th, the day specified in U.S. law for the casting of votes by the members of the Electoral College. Yeah, I mean, like clearly they shouldn't be transmitting, but like this is like a coin toss after the recount for who's actually going to win. But yeah, again, and also right after the recount was done, apparently the governor shipped the letter to the fucking Congress and literally said, "Hey, like go ahead and toss the other one. Like we finished the recount. Like here's the actual thing."
So again, what I'll say though is that by the letter of the law, they shouldn't be allowed to do this. And if you say, but the intent matters, fair enough. But then to me,
well, but hold on, but real quick, by the letter of the law, they were supposed to have their recount done by December 19th, but they hadn't. So what do you do past this point? Do they just don't get any electoral college votes, or?
I would say that you're not allowed to have an alternate slate of electors. You could have had some sort of remediation where you go to the governor and go to the courts in Hawaii and say, like, look, the governor can't sign off on the official slate of electors until this official recount's done. I don't think that you as an elector get to unilaterally be like, fuck all that. We're going to cast our slate of alternate electors. That seems to not go to the courts. That seems to be subverting the court and taking unilateral action. Correct?
Sure. Yeah. So this would probably be inappropriate, I guess. Yeah. But I mean, like the goal here is not to flip an election. I don't think anybody here is necessarily acting in bad faith to work in contravention to the will of the Hawaiian people, right? Because again, this is 114 or 141 vote victory, so the recount is on either side here. Also, what you're describing, I think, is basically what happened in 2000, right? Wasn't there an actual stalling of the Florida shit because they were trying to recount?
I believe that's true. I off the top of my head, I can't. But yeah. But again, right, it's the idea of taking, when you say intent, I understand what you really mean. It's maybe not the word intent's not the best to sum it up. What you really mean is their case is far stronger of saying like, wait. It's not just our fucking shoddy belief that something shady happened. We literally have an official recount going.
Yeah.
So that when you say intent, because intent, I think that you're just fundamentally wrong that Trump and others didn't legitimately believe the election was stolen.
Okay, here's a quick question on that, and then we can move to this immediately if you want. Here's a quick question. Let's say that if you could put a probe into Donald Trump and everybody else's mind, and they knew that there was no election fraud, would you say then, okay, well, this was an attempted coup? If he is asking him to toss these things and he knows that there's not election fraud.
If Donald Trump, like if somehow we had some sort of alien technology that we could literally 100% see that Donald Trump knew, yeah, I know I lost, I know there was no fraud, and he still did this, would that be a coup?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Then the next part of the question
I
in terms
think that if Trump intentionally is seeking ways to subvert what he knows were the legitimate results in an attempt to vainly stay in power, I think, yes, I would consider that my definition of a coup. I do not think that's remotely what happened. I think not only did Donald Trump believe in 2020 that the election was stolen from him, I think he believes it to this day. I think he absolutely 100% believes it.
Sure. So then can we go through, like, what are any pieces of evidence whatsoever that you would have that shows that Donald Trump legitimately thinks that he's lost the election? Or I'm sorry, legitimately thinks that the election was rigged and he shouldn't have lost the election.
Can I do one more quick thing on the previous subject? And then I'm happy. Like, so those were results that we had. There are other times that alternate electors were used. But famously in 2016, we had several Democrat electors that signed on against the rules to be alternate electors, basically to subvert Donald Trump. Would you admit that those Democrat electors engaged in a coup and should be prosecuted?
Wait, say that one more time.
We had in 2016, for example, I'm looking at a Politico article. Okay. Democrat presidential electors revolt against Trump. At least half a dozen Democrat electors have signed on to an attempt to block Donald Trump from winning the Electoral College majority. An effort designed not only to deny Trump the presidency, but also to undermine the legitimacy of the institution. The presidential electors, mostly former Bernie Sanders supporters who hail from Washington State and Colorado, are now lobbying their Republican counterparts in other states to reject their oaths and in some cases state law to vote against Trump when the Electoral College meets on December 19th. Even the most optimistic among Democrat electors acknowledges they're unlikely to persuade the necessary 37 Republican electors to reject Trump, the number they'd likely to need to deny the presidency. And even if they do, Republican House will simply elect Trump anyways. But the Democrat electors are convinced, even in defeat, their efforts would erode confidence in the Electoral College and fuel efforts to eliminate it. Ending the body's 228-year run is the only official constitutional process for electing the president. Would you admit that that was a coup by those people and they should have been criminally charged?
I don't know if like is it even like illegal to coup? I don't even know what the fuck, if that's like an illegal thing. In terms of like U.S. code, like I know that
what are they
like,
charging Trump with? They're not charging him with coup.
No, I believe they're charging Trump. His charge is committing fraud against the American public with respect to their vote. I can check.
Okay.
January 6th, D.C. indictment Trump. I believe
that would seem. Do you mind if I grab a drink real quick? It'll just be 10 seconds.
Yeah, go for it.
All right.
Oh, this is it. Sorry. I need to stop saying this fraud. These are the actual charges.
Okay, sorry about that. I'm back. You there?
Yeah, okay. So to be clear, the charges against Trump are conspiracy to defraud the United States, conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding, conspiracy of an attempt to obstruct an official proceeding, and conspiracy against rights. Those are what he's being charged with.
Okay, so skip the two in the center. That's just obstruction of justice. So conspiracy against rights and conspiracy to defraud basically the electors.
I guess basically, yeah.
Without delving too deeply in the law, it seems like intentionally subverting the will of the voters because you're pissed about the electoral college system would meet that criteria.
Okay, I would have to see specifically what those electors said, but I mean, like, if anybody's talking about being faithless electors, I'm always going to be against those people. Always, of course.
Well, right, being against, and again, I say the same thing. I think that.
No. Hold on. You don't say the same thing because I would say,
sure,
those people were essentially trying to coup the government, and you won't say that. So we don't say the same thing.
I don't think that's necessarily a coup. In fact, I would specifically say in this case that wasn't a coup. I don't know if my argument holds up that I was going to say there because even if they would have went through with it, it still would have resulted in Trump being president because it would have went to the states and the states would. So in that case, it was clearly that they didn't believe that this would legitimately keep Trump out of office. They thought this could lead to a change in systems that in future elections could benefit.
I still don't like it. The idea of changing, not voting along with what you're probably supposed to. Like, I think faithless electors are, I don't know if I call it a coup, but whatever the fuck, like this subverting of the process of voting, I think is some of the worst things you can do.
Let me be clear. I completely agree that what Trump asked Pence to do was the wrong thing. I think Trump was right in that there were significant questions about the election that needed to resolve that still haven't been resolved in many cases. But I think he was wrong in his attempt to do it. The problem with Donald Trump is that he identified correctly that there was a swamp and that there were people that were corrupted. I could talk at great length about these institutions that were corrupt. But he waited too long to do anything about it. You can't do it. And listen, and to any Trump supporter out there, and I've argued with Trump supporters that say, no, Pence shouldn't have done this. All I could say is, okay, if Trump wins in 2024 and Kamala Harris says, you know what, never mind, we're going to delay this shit until we look at things in the way we want to look. What will you be saying? You will be fucking livid. That doesn't mean that it rises to the level of like criminal conspiracy or keeping people off of. I don't think it would. I think that there is more harmful coups that have been done that actually did rise to the level of criminality, such as the FBI illegally spying on Trump's campaign based on knowing.
What about it? Okay.
Right.
I'm just trying to take on this super.
The idea. It's not. I'm just saying those things I've legitimately called a coup, but I'm not. I never called the electors in 2016 a coup. I didn't, right? Like, I didn't say that the people that did that were engaged in a coup. And even if I did use that language, the important part is I never called for them to be arrested, right? Who gives a what word I use?
Okay, gotcha. Okay, all this is ejecting this. Don't care. Okay, so what do we think for Trump intentionally, or I'm sorry, why do we believe that Trump knew or had good reason to believe that the elections had been rigged against him? Let's try to figure out a state of mind. Why do we think he actually thought the election was rigged?
Okay, so there is a host of specific things in different states that he could have felt. So, for example, let's take my state of Pennsylvania. In my state of Pennsylvania, the laws massively changed in how we did votes. And there were supposed to be there were all sorts of questions. For example, one of the changes had to do with whether or not your signature on your voter registration had to match your mail-in ballot signature. And there was going to be obvious legal questions that were brought about this to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. So on election night, I'm covering the election with journalists in Pennsylvania, and the people in the different districts were instructed to keep separate piles of ballots for the ballots that would be, ones that the signatures didn't verify, ones that were received after the deadline, and things like that. And most of those just got mixed together. And the courts were like, well, we can't really decide, right? And so, for example, in Pennsylvania, there was a court decision, I don't know if it's been overruled or if it's still going to be heard, that said it was against the Pennsylvania state constitution to allow mail-in voting the way it happened. That court decision was won, that the way that the 2020 election was proffered was illegal, was against the United States Constitution.
Okay, hold on.
So
can we walk through, we're going to walk through these. Can
Sure.
we find the Pennsylvania decision? Pennsylvania court decision, Trump president. Donald Trump versus for president, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Donald J. Trump for President, Inc. versus Bucks County Board of Elections is a lawsuit filed by the Trump campaign and others in the Pennsylvania Court of Common Pleas on November 9th, 2020. The plaintiffs appealed the decision of the board to count over 2,200 ballots that lacked a date or voter address or were not sealed with secrecy sleeves, claiming the votes are invalid. The lawyers for the Trump campaign have signed an agreement that they do not allege and that there is no evidence of any fraud in connection with the challenged ballots. They also declared that they were not alleging votes from dead people, misconduct, or impropriety related to those ballots and had no evidence of such happenings. Judge Robert O'Baldy denied the plaintiff's petition and ordered all ballots to be counted. The Trump campaign appealed the decision on November 25th. The Commonwealth Court also ruled that all ballots should be counted. The Trump campaign filed an emergency petition in the Pennsylvania Supreme Court asking for review of the case, and on December 8th, the court denied the petition for appeal. Is this the Pennsylvania case we're talking about, or is there another?
No. So what I'm talking about is, this article's from Spotlight, PA, from January 29, 2022. A court just struck down...
Can you link me real quick?
Yeah. Just I'll send it to your DMs in Discord there. One second. I'm a boomer, so it takes me a minute here. Let's see. All right. It should have sent to you. So... Court just struck down Pennsylvania's mail voting law. Here's what you need to know. This is Spotlight, PA, January 29th, 2022. Harrisburg, Pennsylvania's mail voting law, known as Act 77, was ruled unconstitutional Friday by a state court after a challenge brought by Republicans, but it will remain in place for the time being, and the Wolf administration pursues an appeal to the Supreme Court. Here's what you need to know about the decision. So this was in January of 2022. Mm-hmm. So there were legitimate questions about the legality of the way that the voting changes occurred in Pennsylvania. So much so that the idea that this was all resolved by January 6, 2020 is laughable, seeing as how when it was finally had its day in court, it actually was ruled to be illegal. Now, full disclosure, I believe in August of that same year, the Supreme Court overruled this court decision. But the idea that this was resolved is nonsensical. It wasn't. There were legitimate questions, so much so that at least the lower court initially ruled that, yes, these votes shouldn't have counted. And clearly, if those mail-in votes don't count in Pennsylvania, Trump wins Pennsylvania going away.
The Constitution currently states that voters have to cast ballots at a polling place within their district. Absentee ballots can be cast by voters who are unable to appear in person because of business or occupation, or given that it has been necessary in the past to amend the Constitution to specifically state who can vote absentee. The 3 judges found no excuse. Mail-in voting would also require an amendment. Would Pennsylvania flipping on its own have been enough to reverse the entire election?
I believe he would have needed one more state.
Yeah, because I thought he needed a few more than that.
But nonetheless, if Trump, so you could say, would you concede at least under this metric, even a court ruled eventually, that there could have been reason in Trump's head to believe that he won Pennsylvania on the date of January 6, 2020?
That's possible, but if that was the case, then Trump should have been stating only this instead of the 50 million other stolen ballot boxes, suitcase of ballots, dead voters, et cetera, that he continued to rely on that he had no reason to believe were true. If Trump had been repeating just this case the entire time, in fact, I'm not even sure if Trump ever mentions this, although I'd be interested, maybe he did. If Trump was only repeating this, then maybe I would lend a little bit more, it would lend more credence that he was acting in good faith. But that doesn't seem to be the case. He was
no. Because let's be clear, right? Like Trump's allowed to, if Trump thinks that the election was stolen from him in 50,000 different ways, he's absolutely within his rights to say so if he legitimately believes that. The fact that
but the question is the question is proving if he legitimately believes that, though. The issue with Trump is that he's stating so many falsehoods that he's been informed on over and over again are false. That's the issue.
Well, that's not true. He's been told they're false by certain people, but other people are not telling him that that's false.
To be clear, he's been told. He's been told they're false by every single person in his circle. The only people that are saying other things are outside parties that will approach him, that he continually goes to his inner circle over and over again and say, hey, do you think this is true? And them saying no over and over again. I mean, like,
okay,
because
let me take a different tactic then, right? Let's say you're right. Let's say that of the 500 things, hypothetically, Trump said 500 things, and clearly we could easily dispense with 490 of them. They're all bullshit. But if the other 10 are legitimate and it would have changed the results of the election, would it matter that he spewed the 490 false ones?
Yes, because it's showing that he's not acting in good faith. The intent here is to just defraud the American public. If he was only leaning in on 5 or 6 theories that were somewhat sound, then we'd be having a totally different conversation. It's the fact that he was spreading 500 plus conspiracy theories that his inner circle were telling him over and over again weren't true. If a couple of these happen to be true, I mean, he spread so many false ones. Clearly, truth is not what he's after here. He's just trying to do whatever he can to hold on to power.
I completely disagree. I think that, first off, I don't believe just because even if people in his camp told him, look, there's no evidence of this, we don't see it, that doesn't mean that Trump thought, oh, okay, then I obviously know it's not true. He would have thought, you're not looking hard enough. Clearly the evidence is there. I heard this person say this. And you might say that makes Trump a idiot if he's listening to the My Pillow guy over Bill Barr.
In that case, in every single criminal conviction into the perpetuity, into all the rest of humankind or whatever, as long as somebody is telling you that something might be possible, you can no longer ever be acting in bad faith or with ill intent. As long as there's somebody telling you that something might be possible. Is that the argument you're going with?
No, that's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying in crimes that require intent, the threshold is immensely upon the person that is claiming to know the intent of the person. And merely stating, well, we know his intent because this guy told him something, is not true.
Well, it's not that this guy told him. It's that every single person in his immediate circle and every single person that was in his campaign, that was in the White House, that he was working with, was telling him this is bullshit, this is bullshit. And the only theories that he had to rest on were outside people coming like, hey, Trump, like, check out this shit. Like, maybe this could be the thing. And then he goes to his inner circle, like, hey, could this be a thing? And they're like, no, it's not. We've looked into it. And then he continues to propagate that. Yeah, I think any reasonable mind would look at that and it's like, oh, obviously his intention was to lie.
Listen, I don't believe your claim that every single person in his inner circle said. I think that's an over-exaggeration. And I think the greater point is that if there was legitimate reasons, and like, for example, the narrative you heard and the narrative you said, whether you intended to or not, was all of these cases were bullshit. It was all bullshit. I just showed you one in Pennsylvania you were unaware of.
Well, but it got overturned. He lost. On the merits.
Nonetheless, the question of his intent, he clearly had reason to believe that this could be a legitimate gripe, seeing as how a court agreed with that in 2022.
A full conservative court agreed on a 3-2 ruling that would later get reversed by a Supreme Court that is a 6-3 conservative court. I mean, like...
No, wait a minute. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court's conservative? No.
I thought I read that. I thought it said in the article you linked.
Unless it wasn't the Supreme Court that overturned. Maybe it was the Superior Court? But the Supreme Court, I'm pretty sure in Pennsylvania, even prior to these most recent election, I'm pretty certain is Democrat controlled.
Oh, sorry. I thought I read conservative after that, but I'm not sure.
Nonetheless, it's irrelevant anyways, right? To the point of whether or not there was a credible reason for him to believe.
But again, like the test here would be: is he putting out this theory over and over and over again, or is he putting out other bullshit theories?
It doesn't matter, and this is why, because the argument is, right, he absolutely 100% without a doubt knew that the election wasn't rigged. That's bullshit. He still to this day believes it's rigged. And you said, well, give me an example of sort of the type of thing that Trump could have been looking at thinking this election was taken from you. I gave you one, the way that the election laws were changed in Pennsylvania in 2022. A court ruled that was unconstitutional. A higher court ruled that overturned it. But nonetheless, even in 2022, there were significant legal theories and challenges with competent lawyers on both sides arguing whether or not this mass changing to voting was legal based on the Pennsylvania state constitution. And what I was going to do do is go through it. You said, well, that's just one state, Pennsylvania. Okay, we could go to Georgia. We could go to Arizona.
Okay, wait, hold on. So here's a question, just so I can understand where we're at, because then we don't have to bother with the rest. So if somebody makes 100 claims and 98 of them are completely bold-faced false, and he has no reason to believe they're true, and everyone around is saying they're false, and 2 of them might be legitimate, you would say that, well, this person's acting in good faith because the 2 were legitimate? Is that your argument?
The idea of good faith.
Wait. I need you to. Yeah, you got to engage with this question.
No, that is not my argument. My argument is that Donald Trump absolutely believes that the election was stolen from him, and that made him gullible because this is going to give me 30 seconds, please, to expound.
Okay.
The truth is that I agree that in certain ways the election was stolen, probably not in the ways that Trump thinks. But even if there was fraud, 99 out of 100 claims that you hear are going to be false. In other words, if we could say that the 2024 election, if we could look and we could be clairvoyant and we could say, yep, absolutely, in these 3 states there were fraud, the wrong person won because of that. But we were forced to stay silent. 99 out of 100 of the claims that would come out as a result after 2024 would be wrong. That's just the nature of how it's going to be. So Trump legitimately thinking that it was stolen and having good reason to have questions in certain cases is gullible enough because of that and because of the treatment that he's received. The reason that he had a propensity to believe it was stolen in the first place was because of the corrupt treatment that had been
If Trump is this gullible, do you agree that by whatever amendment rules somebody like mentally incompetent to stand office, you agree Trump should never be allowed to hold office if he's this gullible? Do you agree with that?
No,
I don't understand I don't understand this Republican go-to argument of like Trump was bullied and so he tried to coup the government. This sounds like this is like an insane argument to me.
If you're running for office, right, and the FBI and a bunch of other institutions illegally and unlawfully spy on you in unprecedented ways that have never occurred, and then you think that you have these people telling you like, holy shit, like all these ballots are coming in and they look like they were digitally made and the paper size wasn't the correct paper and the machines were hooked up to the internet and they're not supposed to be, and you're like, wow, this sounds fun. And they stop counting in the middle of the night, and then all of a sudden
every single one of these claims were validated or were investigated, and almost every single one of these claims was not true. Trump was saying that the election was going to be fraudulent a year before it even happened. He started saying it was going to be rigged. How is this not like every single not in this way, not at all.
I'm sorry. So was Biden's team. Of course they were. In fact, there was Democratic talking points that came out that said that if Trump won, that it would be an illegitimate election, just like they said it was going to be.
That's not even remotely the same. And I know that we all love to go to that one Hillary Clinton quote that she said in the one interview about him being illegitimate because he had help from Russia. That is a fundamentally different claim than the claim that Trump's team is making about the big lie that there was a top-down conspiracy to rig the votes in almost every single state in order to give Biden the win. These are 2 completely different claims.
I don't know is that the claim? Can you show me Trump suggesting that?
Suggesting that, that all of these ballot boxes, that these were being rigged across the entire United States. Yeah, across several states, across hundreds of districts. Yeah, that's the claim.
What I heard was suggestion was that there was legitimate fraud or illegalities that occurred in swing states in an election that was decided by basically 3 states and 44,000 votes. That's what I heard.
What Trump was saying, hold on, wait. So you didn't hear Trump saying over and over again things like illegal ballot boxes are being counted. They brought a suitcase of ballots in. There's 5,000 dead voters. Those are the claims that Trump was making over and over and over again.
Sure. Right. Where at? Like that's different than saying.
What do you mean where at?
Single state. What you just said. So for example, Trump won how many states? And your argument is that Trump's argument, what he's out there saying is, even in the states I won, in every single state, every leader, there was a top-down movement to steal the election. No, I've never heard him say that.
No, not well. Of course not. Why would you want to contend the states that you've won in?
Right. So then your argument seems to be hyperbolic, where you're saying Trump came out and said, every single state, there's a top-down. No, he never said that. That's what I'm saying. He's saying.
I'm sorry. Wait. Okay. My bad. Hold on. You're hyper-focusing on the dumbest part of my statement. My bad. So I'm sorry. Not in every single state, but in every single state that he lost, there was a top-down conspiracy, whether it was through the courts, through Democrats, through illegal vote boxes, through dumps of votes, through dead voters, et cetera, et cetera. He was alleging a conspiracy.
I think, even that I think is hyperbolic. I don't think he said in every state, for example, in deep blue states, that he really won.
No, in the states that he lost, in the states that he needed to win the election.
Right. That's what I'm saying. That's exactly what I'm saying. He's saying in these swing states, right, where there were people in positions of prominence that didn't like him, particularly in states that had blue governors or something like that, or in cities where the elections were ran that were deep blue, like in Fulton County, for example. He's saying that he sees anomalies that suggested that there was a swinging of the votes to ensure that he didn't win, right? Now, I've already conceded to you that I believe that 9 out of every, even if we could see that the election was stolen from Trump, that still 9 out of every 10 of the claims would be bullshit. For example, on my channel, I can't tell you immediately after the election how many days I spent fighting with right-wingers that were saying absurd shit like, more people voted in the state of Wisconsin than there were voters registered. That's a bullshit claim that was easy to look into almost immediately and say, no, that's not true if you go to the official, right? So most of the claims you're hearing are bullshit. Trump's gullible enough because in his heart of hearts, he sees how he's been mistreated over and over, and he's seeing things that he thinks are indicative of, well, now we've massively changed the way we vote. And we have mail-in drop-off boxes where all of a sudden the cameras went out. And we have hundreds of thousands of ballots in Georgia where the chain of custody just happened to be missing, right? Like all of these things he's seeing over and over, and he's saying, fuck this. I was cheated. They stopped counting in the middle of the night. Batches are coming in that are 99.8% Biden. I won almost every bellwether that predicts who wins the presidency in the past, but for some reason they were wrong this time. Like, he's absolutely... Now, that's not proof that the election was stolen. That's not what I'm suggesting. But that's enough to reason to believe that Trump thought that it was stolen from him, which is the question that you're posing.
Don't you think that, like, not to appeal to Occam's razor, isn't it so much simpler to just assume that Trump wanted to hold on to power by any means necessary? And if I give you that statement, it describes literally every single action that Trump has taken in the past, like, 8 years or whatever to try to like win back the election or hold on to power. Doesn't it explain literally every single thing? For instance, can you find me a single action that would be incongruent with that statement?
Yes. Would you like to hear some?
Yeah, one at a time. Don't just one at a time.
All right, let's give you an easy one. He starts a war right before the election and then declares, because we're in a serious war, that he can't be removed from power like Zelensky.
How does that not prove what I just said?
No, what I'm saying, if your argument is, by any means necessary, he would have stayed in power, surely he had to see that the election was going to at least be close. So if your claim is this, he was going to stay in power by any means necessary, he knows the election's going to be close, but he decides he'll take his chances with the election and then come out and whine, and somehow that whining will keep him in power, versus if truly his agenda was to stay in power by any means necessary, before the election, he would have started a war with someone like China, and then said, oh, now that we're in a serious war that might branch into a world war, I have to maintain my position as head of the military.
Wait, hold on. So your argument is that because Trump didn't start World War III, he must not have been doing everything he could to hold on to power?
I'm saying you asked me to provide a scenario where...
No, I'm asking if there's an action that he did, not like the 50 billion hypothetical actions. Is there an action he did that's incongruent with him just wanting to hold on to power?
Well, couldn't you say that about... Yeah, he left office eventually.
Okay, that's kind of true.
I mean, couldn't you say that about... Like, don't you think, hypothetically, that Joe Biden, if he loses, will want to hold on to power? Yeah, in his heart of hearts, he would like to stay.
No, I think that if Joe Biden lost the election, just like Hillary Clinton, I think that he would concede that night. He wouldn't go on TV like Donald Trump did and try to claim that he won the election despite every single person around him telling him not to say that and having to have his own vice president go on camera and say, we're actually going to go ahead and wait for the votes to be finished counting before we try to say that we won the election. I don't know what the f my president is saying right now. That's a circumstance, for instance, that's easily explained by Trump just wanting to do whatever he can to hold on to power. Like Trump saying, stop the count. Why do you think he said stop the count? Do you think that was him trying to genuinely ensure that the democratic process is being followed, or do you just want to hold on to power?
I think he was saying, like many people thought, that there would be fraudulent counts that came in to tip the balance for Biden at the end of the night, as it seems to suggest that's what happened.
But literally every single person knew this was going to happen, Trump and Trump's team included, that mail-in ballots were going to heavily favor Democrats, that like Bernie Sanders was literally talking about the exact states that would switch on TV like a week before. Everybody knew this was going to happen.
That might be true, but is it to the level it happened? Let me ask you this. If you were going to steal the election, wouldn't the easiest way to do it be to do it in ways that you've told people would look like exactly how it would look like?
Oh my God, Rob, this is like an all roads lead to Rome fallacy. Like in that case, if they would have done it in a way that none of us would have known, then you would say, well, of course they were hiding it the whole time. But if they do it in a way they're going to say they're going to do it, well, wouldn't you try to do it in the way that you were going to say? No, I don't think you would try to do it in the way you were going to say you would do it, because you'd probably get caught. What do you mean? You have an unprecedented, you have more scrutiny of the election probably than any election in all of modern history. Why would you tell people how you're going to rig it ahead of time?
It's absolutely bullshit, and you could see from the sort of reaction to that they've had that's bullshit. For example, they said, and I'm quoting, "You were told that not only was there not enough fraud to sway the election in a election season where we massively changed how we voted, by the way, to a less secure method in mail-in voting in many states. But not only was there not enough fraud to tip, but it was, and I'm quoting now, the most secure election ever." That is the official statement from the same people that you were saying that were like, oh, there's no fraud. That is such a bullshit statement that it raises a
Why is it such a bullshit statement?
So it's your argument, out of every election that's ever called in the United States, the one that just happened to literally be the most secure ever was the one where we massively changed how we voted.
It wouldn't surprise me if most of the elections going forward were the most secure ever, because every new election, you've got new technologies and new processes to validate and verify votes. That's probably why Trump lost almost every single case he brought forward on the merits to check for voter fraud. And it's why even when Trump was in office and put together that commission to find voter fraud, he found none in his own government with his own people that he appointed that commission.
Again, it is, everyone listening to this knows that it's, for example, one of the elections we had right after that, although it was just a state election, it happened to be in one of the biggest areas in New York City. Remember we had the election for, was it mayor of New York City, where it took weeks and weeks and weeks because, whoops, we accidentally put a bunch of test ballots in. Our bad, we put these test ballots in. And I think it was Adams came out and was like, whoa, because all the polling numbers showed he was way ahead.
Wait, hold on. I don't think anybody said the New York state elections were the most secure elections ever. Did they?
Right. They did not. So my point is this. Your argument seems to be, well, the reason that we could predict that this was the most secure election ever was because of the technology we have now. But then immediately following, the first big election we have after that is a total clusterfuck. Total clusterfuck. So what I'm supposed to believe is this.
Let's say I grant you all of this. I grant you all of this. It's a clusterfuck, new things, blah, 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 blah. Let's say all of that is true, and it's obviously true. It's so obvious that every conservative Trump online seems to be pointing it out. Why didn't Barr back Trump? Why didn't Meadows back Trump? Why didn't any single person on his legal team immediately, why didn't anybody that was part of Trump's camp back Trump? Why didn't Pence back Trump? He's vice president. He should be more incentivized than anybody else. Why did nobody else back Trump on any of these claims then?
Two reasons. One, because a lot of the people you're citing, specifically Bill Barr, is corrupt and was there to keep the corruption going against Trump and do nothing about it. And secondly, because they might think like I did. Why didn't I back Trump? Well, because without definitive proof, it would be damaging to this country to just boldly assert, no.
Wait, so then you agree that Trump didn't have proof of any of these things then?
I don't think that he had proofs positive, no.
Any proof at all?
Well, I mean, he had proof of serious questions that needed answered that he didn't think was resolved, but he didn't have proof that that would have went the way he wanted it. I said that as much from the outset. I said that I have not seen 100% proof positive. What I've seen is a lot of legitimate questions. For example, hundreds of thousands of ballots in Georgia that the chain of custody got lost. And we have chain of custody rules in our ballots for a specific reason.
How many times? Didn't the Georgia shit get recounted twice or whatever? Is that...
Well, recounts not an audit. A recount's just counting the ballots. For example, let's say hypothetically...
Wait, so do you think, real quick, so is the Georgia thing, you're saying this is still not resolved?
I don't believe so. So let's say hypothetically there's 1 million votes in Georgia. Clearly that's not the case, but just a nice round number. There's 1 million votes in Georgia, right? And there's an accusation that 100,000 of those had an improper chain of custody. That for 6 hours we don't know where the ballots were or who were in the rooms with the ballots. That's 100,000 out of 1 million. To simply recount those 1 million ballots doesn't answer the question of chain of custody. Now, even if it's legitimate that chain of custody was not followed...
Okay, can I just I just want to read on this real quick, okay? So this was put out in 2021, so a couple years ago, by the GPB, whatever the f*** this is. For the past 7 months, misinformation and false claims of fraud in Fulton County have dominated certain corners of the internet and the Republican Party, with many refusing to accept results that showed 3 separate times that Donald Trump lost Georgia. Georgia's most populous county is home to the heavily Democratic city of Atlanta and a history of problems and shortcomings with the election administration. But ever since November's presidential race saw President Joe Biden flip Georgia by about 12,000 votes, some pro-Trump media outlets and politicians have zeroed in on Fulton in search of a smoking gun that would prove massive fraud, cost the former president a victory. Those calls have come even after a full hand count, risk-limiting audit confirmed Biden Biden's victory, and a Trump campaign ordered recount validated victory once more. In recent weeks, a Newsmax personality launched a weekend of fantastic speculation about an alarm at a building that included Fulton's ballot warehouse, a Constitution Party officer who spouted fringe views, blah, blah, blah. So she said evidence would emerge. Wait, I thought that there was Okay. One claim is that the Fulton County is missing hundreds of transfer records for thousands of absentee ballots deposited in 38 drop boxes ahead of November's election, with an implication that the missing paperwork could or should invalidate more ballots to the margin of Biden's victory. Is this one of the things we're talking about, or?
I slightly lost you there. If you could reread like the last two sentences.
That we were missing, asserting that the county was missing 385 absentee ballot transfer forms used to document how many ballots were retrieved from drop boxes daily, and suggesting the provenance of nearly 19,000 ballots was questionable. Is this part of what we're talking about?
It may be. What I've heard is that there was chain of custody issues with around, allegedly different ways around 170,000. So there were different chain of custody issues with some of those ballots.
After GPB News asked the county Monday about the forms not included in the Georgia Star's records request, election staff located all but 8 of more of the 1,500 forms, sent them to state investigators, and provided them to GPB News on a flash drive. What is this chain of custody thing is lost? Wait, can you link me a story about this, or?
Yeah. 1 second. And again, I do apologize that I was out with my family all day and didn't have time to get sources together and stuff. But here's one it's from, I don't know how reputable this site is, American Greatness, from Deborah Hain in June 4th, 2021. It says a Fulton County election official has admitted in writing that a few chain of custody documents are missing for thousands of absentee ballots deposited in Dropbox November 3rd, 2020 election in Georgia. According to the Georgia Star News analysis, however, the county has lost more than a few transfer forms. The news outlet puts the number at 385, representing 18,901 votes, or about 25% of the absentee ballots in the Fulton County 2020 election.
So then the response to this is apparently all but 8 of those 1,500 forms have been accounted for.
So when was the date? What was the date of the article that you put forth?
June 17th, 2021.
Okay, so this is June 14th. So it's right around the same time. So let's
to be clear, this was literally in response to that Georgia Star article. But after GPB News asked the county Monday about the forms not included in the Georgia Star's records request, election staff located all but 8 of the more than 1,500 forms and sent them to state investigators and provided them to GPB News on a flash drive.
Okay, let's say that's true, that it's resolved. I don't know. I don't know what the response to that is. The point is, this is from 2021. Right. And so it was clear up until that point, even election officials were admitting that at least 18,000 of votes that they had lost chain of custody.
I don't think that's true. I think that people were probably Trump and his team and everybody emailing Trump was trying to dig into every esoteric theory possible. And so we were getting recounts and we were getting re-audits and all of these things, but none of the results changed at all. So it seems like all of this is bullshit.
Well, again, those issues there's still issues in Georgia that are being taken to court. For example, Raffensperger is refusing to testify about voting machines that were used even this week. Is even something that's being talked about. So the idea that we had election officials admitting okay, we have been unable to provide the ballots or the chain of custody for 18,000 ballots thus far. And then finally in June 17th, which I'm not conceding that their response in June 17th is the end all be all, because we've seen before where they say that and then actually there's a retort. But even if that is the case, that wasn't provided until June 17th, 2021. So if you're looking at the election in January 6, 2021, right, you could reasonably say there are huge issues with chains of custody.
I don't think there were huge. I don't think anybody was legitimately questioning this. I think it was just Trump getting esoteric theories because, again, were any of these things changed? Did anything come out of any of these challenges that were all being chased down in every single state from Trump's team and everybody else? Did anything end up amounting to anything? Or is it just that if you ask 50,000 questions in relation to the election, a few people are going to be like, oh, shit, hold on, let me check this. We don't have the answer for you immediately.
Now, what I'm saying is that Trump, it doesn't matter if things were eventually ran down or anything like that. It's clear that there wasn't going, even if, let me ask you this, seeing as how we have Supreme Court justices, when they issue a decision, that decision getting leaked, and then people protesting outside their house and assassination attempts occur, what do you think the chutzpah would require in that event if there was a serious challenge to look into it and say, yeah, actually the election results would be overturned? What do you think that would do to the country?
What do you, are you saying that the Supreme Court decision. I don't understand the argument you're making here. What?
The argument I'm making is that unless you going into the case had like 100% fucking proof positive that some serious fraud occurred, you'd be very hesitant to start to delve into something that could legitimately change the results of an election.
Wait, so you're saying that all of these people, every single one, was just too scared to dive in?
No, I'm saying many of these were rejected on things like standing, and it's not just their personal safety, but it's also knowledge of what would happen in the country if they decided to raise these questions, how it would
Has any judge ever or anybody come out saying that we were too scared to look into this because it might hurt the country?
Well, no, that would be pretty dumb of them to admit that, wouldn't it?
Well, wouldn't it be dumb for Comey to come out and say that we've reopened an investigation on Hillary Clinton and that we've announced the results of a investigation? Wouldn't that also be dumb? Didn't that also happen? Wasn't that also maybe election determinative? I mean,
well, seeing as how you brought it up, and I've answered this for you 3 or 4 times, I will repeat my answer then. He was forced to do so because a whistleblower within the FBI was going outside the FBI because the FBI and James Comey were attempting to conceal evidence of possible criminality of Hillary Clinton that was found on Anthony
none of that
Weiner's
forces
laptop.
Comey to make any statement publicly.
Sure it does, because he knew that the chances of harming Hillary Clinton would be more significant if he continued and forced that whistleblower to go outside, and then another agency would have to say, James Comey buried this evidence to ensure
Do you
Hillary
have any
Clinton was
proof
elected.
that Comey said that he felt pressured by the whistleblower to go public to help Hillary's campaign?
I have well, of course he didn't say the latter part, right? But he said that the reason that he came out was because of the whistleblower. That's what I don't know that he admitted that, but that's what the IG report found. And I've read this to you several times. You know this. You've never even attempted to dispute it. That's absolutely what happened. A member of the FBI that knew that they had this laptop that had emails from Hillary Clinton repeatedly reached out to top brass, including James Comey.
Can you shoot me that again?
Shit. All right.
Because we just read this that, I think we just looked at this yesterday, the day before, that Comey went public. What was this article that just going to be related to Loretta Lynch?
Okay, this is from the IG report. I'll link it to you. I don't know that this is the part that I'm fully talking about because I'm just using the search feature on it. But I'll start to read the initial part where it starts to talk about Anthony Weiner's laptop. Ready? This is from page 11, section 4, discovery in September 2016 of emails on Weiner laptop. In September 2016, the FBI's New York field office and U.S. Attorney for Southern District of New York began investigating former Congressman Anthony Weiner for his online relationship with a minor. The federal search warrant was obtained September 26, 2016 for Weiner's iPhone, iPad, and laptop computer. The FBI obtained these devices the same day. The search warrant authorized the government to search for evidence relating to the following crimes, child porn, stuff like that. The Weiner case agent told the OIG that he began processing Weiner's devices on September 26th. By the way, I'm not watching your screen, Destiny, but I bet your audience is laughing at me saying Weiner over and over, but we'll commence. And that he noticed within hours that there were over 300,000 emails on the laptop. He said that either that evening or the next morning, he saw at least one BlackBerry pin message between Clinton and Abedin, as well as emails between them. He said that he recalled seeing emails associated with about 7 domains, such as yahoo.com, state.gov, clintonfoundation.org, Clinton email, and hillaryclinton.com. The case was immediately notified the NYO chain of command, and the information was ultimately sent to the NYO assistant director in charge, Sweeney, on September 28th. As we described in Chapter 9 of our report, Sweeney took the following steps to notify the FBI headquarters about the mid-year related emails. On September 28th, during a secure video teleconference, Sweeney reported that Weiner investigation agents had discovered 141,000 emails on Weiner's laptop that were potentially relevant to the mid-year investigation. The OIG determined that this SVTC was led by then Director Andrew McCabe, Deputy Director McCabe, and approximately 39 senior FBI executives would have participated. Comey wasn't present. Sweeney said he again spoke to McCabe on the evening of September 28th. Sweeney said that during his call, he informed McCabe that the NYO personnel had continued processing the laptop and now identified 347,000 emails. Sweeney said he also called 2 FBI executive directors on September 28th and informed them that the Weiner case team had discovered emails relevant to the mid-year investigation. One of the EADs told the OIG that he had then called McCabe, and McCabe told the EAD that he was aware of the emails. The AD told us that there was no doubt in my mind when we finished the conversation, McCabe understood the gravity of what the find was. Sweeney said he also spoke to FBI Assistant Director Bill Priestap on September 28th and in 29th, 2016. Emails indicate their conversation on September 29th. They discussed the limited scope of the Weiner search warrant, the need to obtain additional legal processes mid-year. McCabe told the OIG that he considered the information provided by Sweeney to be a big deal, and he instructed Priestap to send a team to New York to review the emails on the Weiner laptop. McCabe told the OIG that he recalled talking to Comey about the issue right around the time McCabe found out about it. McCabe described it as a flyby, where the Weiner laptop was like one on a list of things we discussed. Comey said he recalled first learning about the emails on the laptop some point in early October 2016, although he said it was possible he could have heard about it in late September. Comey told the OIG this information didn't index with him, which he attributed to the way the information was presented to him, and I didn't know that Weiner was married to Huma Abedin. Text messages from FBI Director Assistant Peter Strzok indicated that he, McCabe, and Priestap discussed the Weiner laptop on September 28th. Strzok said he initially planned to send a team to New York to review the emails, but a conference with the NYO was rescheduled instead. The conference took place on September 29th, and 5 members of the FBI mid-year team participated. Notes from the conference call indicate participants discussed the presence of a large volume of emails on the Weiner laptop and specific domain names, including clintonemail.com and thestate.gov. Mid-year SSA said that the NYO also mentioned seeing BlackBerry domain emails on the laptop. Additional discussions took place on October 3rd and 4th, 2016. However, after October 4th, we found no evidence anyone associated with the mid-year investigation, including the entire leadership team at FBI headquarters, took any action on the Weiner laptop issue until October 24th, and then did so only after the Weiner case agent expressed concerns to the Southern District of New York, prompting the Southern District of New York to contact the Deputy Attorney General on October 27th to raise concerns about the lack of action. On Friday, if you want, we can go through more of it, right? But that's saying what I said, that finally the case agent had, because he kept reaching out to the high-level people.
Wait. To be clear, you were talking about like a whistleblower pressuring Comey to go public with the announcing of the reopening of the investigation. So one, I was talking about Comey announcing the results of their prior investigation. I thought that was he was just worried about an optics issue. That was like potentially destructive to Hillary Clinton's campaign, number one. Number two, this is a whole separate issue, but even at that, your initial claim, I don't think has been satisfied at all about this. Is McCabe here considered a whistleblower?
No, it's not McCabe. It is the unnamed lead agent, though it might be Sweeney, that literally kept contacting the FBI and talked to them specifically at the end of September and early October, and the high FBI agents, such as even Comey, admitting we knew as early October, and then
wait, which part are we here?
Text messages of FBI Director Assistant Strzok indicated that he, McCabe, and Priestap discussed the Weiner laptop on September 28th. Strzok said they initially planned to send a team to New York to review the emails, but a conference call in NYU was scheduled instead. The conference call took place September 29th, and 5 members of the FBI mid-year team participated. Notes from the conference indicate participants said the presence of 350,000 emails in the Weiner laptop, specific domain names. They also mentioned seeing BlackBerry. Additional discussions took place on October 3rd and 4th. However, after October 4th, we found no evidence that anyone associated with the mid-year investigation, including the leadership team at the FBI headquarters, took any action on the Weiner laptop until October 24th, and then did so only after the Weiner case agent expressed concerns to the Southern District of New York, which prompted the Southern District of New York.
Wait, real quick. What's the part here about a whistleblower being involved? Am I just missing that every time?
Well, I guess I'm using the term whistleblower to mean the FBI agent that repeatedly reached out to the top brass at the FBI and said, we need to investigate this, that was getting no response, that then had to go outside his agency to a different agency, the Southern District of New York, and say, what I would call blow the whistle, saying, I see significant problems that there are these important emails that no top brass at the FBI is doing anything about. That prompts the Southern District of New York.
And then also, let me be clear here. Wait, I'm just trying to clear. Okay. It looks like here the Weiner case agent expressed concerns to the Southern District of New York. What is this like going outside of everything or whatever? What are we talking about?
So there's normally a chain of command. If you work for the FBI, do you think it's normal to go outside the FBI to different agencies and say, I'm worried that this isn't being investigated?
Is the Southern District of New York a different agency, or is that just another office for the FBI?
I don't believe it's an FBI agent. I believe it's an attorney general. It could be technically considered an FBI agent. But nonetheless, it was outside the traditional chain of command. It was outside.
Wait. Where do you see that at? I'm just trying to figure that out. I don't.
Well, let me repeat what the IG says. Additional discussions took place October 3rd and 4th. However, after October 4th, we found no evidence anyone associated with this investigation, the mid-year investigation, including the entire leadership at the FBI, took any action on this until October 24th, and did so only after Wiener case agent expressed concerns to the Southern District of New York, prompting the Southern District of New York to contact the Deputy Attorney General on October 21st to raise concerns about lack of action. So they had their traditional mid-year investigation that this agent was part of. They had the top FBI leadership that was part of that they were contacting. They repeatedly contacted them and made
Southern
it known.
District of New York is the Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York.
Right.
Okay, gotcha.
So it's not specifically FBI. So he then goes outside of that case of the task force and of the top FBI brass that aren't giving him results, and goes to the Southern District of New York. The Southern District of New York is worried enough about it that they contact the FBI, and they're like, what's going on? This is what forced Comey's hand, as he admitted in his book, and I believe
why did this force Comey to publicly announce the reopening of the investigation?
Because, as Comey admitted, and I believe the IG report might suggest this, and Comey admitted in his book, he thought that Hillary Clinton was easily going to re-win an election. And he thought it would be
No. That's why he said that he didn't think it would matter as much. But I'm asking, what prompted him to announce it publicly?
If you would let me finish, I'm explaining. And so because of such, he was worried that had Hillary won, and then it came out, James Comey gave a public press conference where he exonerated Hillary and said, nope, we've looked at all the evidence. There's nothing to see here. If anything new comes up, we'd let you know, but there's nothing to see here, or, no reasonable prosecutor would prosecute. All the time knowing that there were hundreds of thousands of emails that Comey and the FBI was aware of, but chose to not investigate, and then privately looked at them. Let's say he didn't announce it, he just privately. And then Hillary wins the election. That what Comey was worried about was, rightfully, people would say, James Comey lied. James Comey covered up that there was all these other emails through another person that didn't have the right to see.
But none of what you're saying makes sense. Why didn't he just reopen the investigation but not say anything publicly about it?
Okay, let me repeat again. Maybe I'm talking too fast, right? Because he knew that it would eventually come public, that the public thought the case was closed because he said the case was closed.
Why did he ever even make the announcement that the case was closed? Why did he say anything publicly ever?
Okay, so now we can see that the idea of the second part of it, why did he re-announce the opening? He did so in an attempt because, one, they were trying to cover up for Hillary Clinton, and second, because a whistleblower went outside that it forced their hand to publicly
You still haven't proved anything about the whistleblower going outside and forcing his hand. You're trying to make the claim that, if the investigation would have continued, the fact that this guy that was contacting the Southern District of New York would have shown that they didn't investigate fast. None of this makes sense. Why didn't the FBI announce their investigations into Donald Trump at the time if he was so?
What do you think the IG meant by this? FBI headquarters took any action on the Wiener laptop until October 24th. Quote, and then did so only after the Wiener case agent expressed concerns to the Southern District of New York, prompting the Southern District of New York to contact the Office of the Deputy Attorney General on October 21st to raise concerns about lack of action. What do you think he's saying? Why do you think the IG made it a point to say, it seems like they only took action after this FBI agent went outside the agency to talk to a different agency, and that agency then contacted the FBI about their concerns, and then finally they reopened?
It seems like what it's saying is that the FBI was dragging their feet on this for some reason, and it seems like they only fucking took action on it after the Southern District of New York contacted the Office of the Deputy Attorney General because another guy was raising concerns about it. Yeah.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
You're saying that this motivated Comey to start making public announcements about the investigation.
No, I said that's why they reopened the investigation and the reason that he did it public. So they were trying to cover up let me say this. This either shows through incompetence or corruption. They weren't looking at these emails that they themselves admit were important, but chose not to look at them.
Wait. They themselves admitted it was important. I thought that they just didn't give a fuck because they thought it wasn't whatever. Didn't it end up being nothing? Didn't nothing come from this, or am I wrong?
Let me...
Answer that question. I need you to answer that question. Didn't nothing come from the email investigation?
Right. What came from the email investigation was that the same FBI that could only process about 10 pages a day for Freedom of Information Act requests went through 300-something thousand emails in 2 or 3 days and said, we checked them all, there's nothing to see here. Yes, that is what happened. In 3 days, they went through all the emails and said that there was nothing to see there. Everything was gravy.
Wait,
that
hold on. Wouldn't they just be... Wait. Do you think... Wait, hold on. First of all, did you have problems with the Twitter files when they said that they went through every single email and, like, I think, wasn't it a day they had access to that server room? Weren't they just doing it by searching for keywords and stuff? Wouldn't it be the same thing with the FBI here? Do you think they're going to read every single email? Or do they just see, like, who they're sent to and who they're from to see if it matters or not?
I think in a criminal investigation, it's different than something like the Twitter files investigation, where you would be more diligent and not just doing a few keyword searches.
Wait, in a criminal investigation, wasn't the criminal investigation looking for child porn?
No, but it was part of the mid-year exam. It became part of the mid-year exam once they found emails that was from the domain names that Hillary Clinton had.
Yeah, but wait, how many emails of those 300,000 emails were 2 are from Hillary Clinton?
It doesn't matter.
No, wait. It does, because if only like 4 of those emails were 2 are from Hillary Clinton, then like, yeah, they could probably go through this in literally 20 minutes.
I'm unaware. What I'm telling you is then you would also agree when it comes to Freedom of Information Act requests, it's probably illegitimate for the FBI to say we can only get through like 10 a day.
10 what a day?
Like documents, emails.
When has the FBI said they can only get through 10 emails a day?
Well, I guess I'll just leave it to you to look up how quickly they process Freedom of Information Act requests and how backlogged they are. Nonetheless, another thing.
Wait, hold on. Wait. Just in regards to hold on. What you just said, I'm just going to take a stab in the dark at what you're probably referring to. When for a FOIA request, if they're saying like 10 a day or whatever, are they saying that like when we go through when we're going to release classified information, that it takes us a long time to verify like what might be connected to other things and what needs to remain classified and what needs to remain redacted versus what can be released to the public? Because that's far different than going through 300,000 emails in an internal investigation where you're not worrying about redacting or classifying anything. Those are two completely and totally unrelated questions. How do those things relate to each other whatsoever?
They're not unrelated in that they have the same agency in dealing with the speed of which they could go through things.
No, wait. That is not true. Hold on. The speed in which they can go through things, the speed at which you read an email is going to be significantly different than the speed in which you go through a paper that you want to release to the public that was previously classified to figure out what might be damaging or not. Those are two completely different things, right? You agree that it might take, I maybe read 1,000 emails in the time that it would take me to figure out for one document how many different agencies I need to contact. What is it? The CIA, the NSA, the FBI, how many different people might be involved? That might take days. That might take weeks for a single email. Do you agree with that? I need you to answer that. I need you to answer that without pivoting. Do you agree that it could take days or weeks to verify if a single email could be released to the public or what needs to be redacted?
I will answer that without pivoting as long as then I get the chance to ask questions in a form of a quid pro quo as opposed to you trying to control the direction of the conversation.
Well, I'm just because every time I ask what I think is a really reasonable question, fair? You like pivot off into like some other completely...
I'm not pivoting. Okay. I'll answer
I think that's a super... Yeah, okay. So that's a super reasonable question. I think, is it fair to say that it would take a lot longer to figure out one email, what needs to be redacted versus what can be released publicly for something that's previously classified versus just reading an email? That project... Okay.
Let me answer, and then I get to ask you questions, and we'll
ahead.
do it in a tit-for-tat quid pro quo. Yes, the speed at which those things would happen would be different. However, the desperation of only being able to go through 10 emails when it comes to Freedom of Information Act requests, as opposed to in 2 or 3 days going through hundreds of thousands of emails that you have intentionally sat on and chose not to look at for months, would seem to call into question the motivation of if they really wanted to go through that shit with a fine-tooth comb.
Okay, I disagree.
Okay, now can I ask you? Now you seem to suggest that they didn't.
Wait. One thing, and then I swear to God, you can ask. It's just on this last thing, and then you can answer. Just curious, because the Durham report reviewed all the conduct of these agencies to see if anything improper was done. Did the Durham report go over the Anthony Weiner laptop thing and say that the FBI acted with impropriety and not going over those 300,000 emails?
I'm not quite sure what the conclusion of the Durham report was, or rather they went into the Anthony Weiner laptop. Now, to my question, you seem to suggest that they didn't think it was a big deal. Can you explain what this sentence means? Quote, McCabe told the OIG he considered the information provided by Sweeney, the agent that talked to him about these. Well, let's go up a little. Sweeney said he also spoke to the FBI Assistant Director Beal Precept on September 28th and 29th, 2016. Emails indicate their conversation September 29th. They'd escaped the scope of the Weiner laptop. McCabe told the OIG he considered the information provided by Sweeney to be a big deal and said he instructed Precept to send a team to New York to review the emails. That seems to be, again, can you admit you were wrong when you said they didn't think it was a big deal? Can you admit that? Don't pivot. Just admit you were wrong when you said that, right?
That was what it seemed to be to me, is that they didn't think it was a big deal, yeah.
No. So when you saying, so I just want to be clear, your argument is when McCabe told the OIG he thought this was, quote, a big deal, your interpretation is he didn't think it was a big deal.
Is McCabe part of the executive team?
McCabe is the assistant director of the FBI under only James Comey. Or I'm sorry, he is. Wait. He's maybe third in command. What is his official title? But he's like top 3 guy.
Okay, hold on. Let me find the part down.
Deputy director, so that puts him number 2, right?
Okay, so he's
James
part of
Comey's the director. He's
However,
the
after
deputy
October 4th,
director.
we found no evidence that anyone assisted with the mid-year investigation, including the entire leadership team at the FBI headquarters, took any action on the Weiner laptop issue until the week of October 24th, and then did so only after the Weiner case agent expressed concerns to the SDNY, prompting SDNY to contact the office of the Deputy Attorney General. October was raised concern about the lack of action. Yeah, I don't know. My assumption would be that they didn't think it was a big deal, but apparently McCabe said it was a big deal. So why did McCabe say they sat on it? What was his explanation?
They didn't have one. And if you follow the IG report later, it says that the explanation that was given by the FBI to the IG was basically that they had, I forget exactly how
as
they
we
worded it,
describe
but
in
it was-
Chapter 9 of our report, the explanations we were given for the FBI's failure to take immediate action on the Weiner laptop fell into 4 general categories. 1, the FBI mid-year team was waiting for additional information about the contents of the laptop from NYO, which was not provided until late October. 2, the FBI mid-year team could not review the emails without additional legal authority, such as consent or a new search warrant. 3, the FBI mid-year team and senior FBI officials did not believe that the information on the laptop was likely to be significant. And 4, key members of the FBI mid-year team had been reassigned to the investigation of Russian interference in the U.S. election, which was a higher priority. We found that these explanations to be unpersuasive justifications for not acting sooner, given the FBI's leadership's conclusions about the importance of the information, and the FBI mid-year team had sufficient information to take action in early October and knew at the time that it would need a new search warrant to review any Clinton-Abedin emails. Moreover, given the FBI's extensive resource, the fact that Strzok and several other FBI members of the mid-year team had been assigned to the Russian investigation, which was extremely active during the September and October time period, was not an excuse for failing to take any action during this time period on the Weiner laptop. So could it? Why are we assuming?
Let's keep reading. The FBI's failure
to act in late September or early October is even less justifiable when contrasted with the attention and resources of the FBI management and some members of the mid-year team dedicated to other activities in connection with the mid-year investigation during the same period. As detailed in Chapter 8, these activities included the preparation of Comey's speech at the FBI SAC conference on October 12th. You want me to keep reading?
Just the last sentence, once it gets to the paragraph, I'll read it. In assessing the decision to prioritize the Russia investigation over following up on the mid-year related investigative lead discovered on the Weiner laptop, we were particularly concerned about text messages sent by Strzok and Page that potentially indicated or created the appearance that investigative decisions they made were impacted by bias or improper considerations. So in other words, what this just said in totality is they knew that these emails were important. Their email suggested it. They intentionally didn't act upon it until a whistleblower went outside the agency. That outside agency then goes to the FBI, which forced their hand. But even at the end of it, they can't be certain that the they are not persuaded by the FBI's excuses and actually think that the text messages between Strzok and Page showing obvious bias may have had a conclusion to prioritize going after Trump and Hillary.
Yeah, so that might be the narrative that you're spinning, but it sounds like what's being assessed in this report, or what's being asserted in this report, is that there definitely could have been some bias. I think the Durham report said as much, that they wanted to prioritize the Russia investigation because they thought that there was something more juicy there, and that it seemed to be the case that this particular laptop, they didn't have any good reasons to not pursue it. But why? It seems like a combination of like either incompetence or just like bias here is feeling these things. There's not an intentional effort to obscure or hide this.
That's untrue. That's you inserting your own narrative. So just to be clear, what the IG report showed, even without getting to Durham, and I just went back and watched IG Horowitz testify in front of Congress for 6 hours the other day. It is clear that what the IG report is suggesting is that it was not his role, unless it was 100% definitive, to determine what the intent was by the litany of egregious decisions that the FBI had in their investigation of Hillary versus their investigation of Trump. And that the only explanations that they were able to come up with was either gross incompetence or corruption from bias or somewhere in between those two things.
So something that was literally stated.
Let me finish. But they were unsatisfied with the FBI's explanations, and therefore they kicked the investigation back to Christopher Wray and the FBI to investigate and get to further the bottom as to why these decisions occurred. Furthermore, the one time that he literally says, the IG says, the one time they're willing to go far enough and say, we actually were really concerned about this bias was with the Anthony Weiner thing. Where
okay, so this paragraph down here at the bottom here, the next paragraph literally says, we searched for evidence that the Weiner laptop was deliberately placed in the back burner by others in the FBI to protect Clinton, but found no evidence in emails, text messages, instant messages, or documents that suggested an improper purpose. We also took note of the fact that numerous other FBI executives, including the approximately 39 who participated in the September 28th SVTC, were briefed on the potential existence of mid-year related emails on the Weiner laptop. We also noted that the Russia investigation was under the supervision of Priestap, for whom we found no evidence of bias, and who himself was aware of the Weiner laptop issue by September 29th. However, we also did not identify a consistent or persuasive explanation for the FBI's failure to act for almost a month after learning of potential mid-year related emails on the Weiner laptop. So it seems like a ton of other people knew about this, other people that this IG report did not say were biased, that Priestap himself knew about it and that he didn't seem to be biased at all, but people just didn't dig into it. So again, I'm going to repeat...
That's not what it's suggesting.
That's literally no. That's not what it's suggesting. That's what it literally explicitly says here.
Let me repeat again in ways I understand that the spin will be, because this was the same spin when Horowitz testified in front of Congress that the Democrats said.
Wait, hold on. Hold on. Just to be clear, I'm not spinning. I just read you verbatim from this report that you seem to take as gospel up until this paragraph that you don't like. But go ahead.
No, what I'm saying is the IG repeatedly said, we didn't find a satisfactory explanations for why these things occurred. Was it incompetence or was it bias? Now, what they did find was that there was obvious bias for many members of the FBI, like Peter Strzok, like Kevin Kleinsmith, other people at the top of the FBI that were involved in these investigations. There was bias. What they were unable to find was bias influenced definitively these decisions. The decisions were improper. The explanations that the FBI gave for the decisions were unsatisfactory, but they didn't find things like an email from Bill's Priestap to Andy McCabe that said, hey, let's intentionally not look into the Anthony Weiner laptop to help
question
Hillary Clinton.
For Priestap,
they're saying.
Why didn't
they're
Priestap...
Not saying there wasn't bias or that the bias didn't influence.
Why is it that for Priestap, a guy who knew about the laptop, and the 39 other people who participated in the September 28th SVTC, why didn't Priestap or any of those other people that where no evidence of bias was on, why didn't they more stringently pursue investigation of the laptop?
Well, maybe because there wasn't an email showing their bias, that the culture of the FBI was biased against Trump, as is evident not only by text messages of certain messages, but the fact that they were willing to do all sorts of...
Okay, so then at the very least, then you have no evidence of that. You have no evidence of that.
What the bar of evidence that you're suggesting is this. Unless we have a telephone call where Bill Priestap says, all of these decisions we're making is to over Donald Trump, you say, then there's no evidence.
Wait, do you think that's the only way that you can prove bias?
Well, what did he suggest? I already told you. What Horowitz said was the only attempt they were looking at was they were asking the FBI. They didn't have the ability, for example, to, a panel, a grand jury necessarily and charge people with crimes. They could suggest... I'm just
saying... Also, couldn't it be possible that there's a brand new sexy Russia collusion shit, and then you've got a child porn guy who's got 300,000 emails, and people don't care that much? That McKay might have been like, well, hey guys, maybe this is important, but like most people are like, bro, I want to be focusing on this sexy Russia investigation. This cuck shit. Like, isn't that like a totally valid interpretation of what could have happened?
I understand the propensity for people that want to defend the double standards to say, but isn't it hypothetical in some world that the FBI could just have over and over and over again prioritize things to would be the detriment of Donald Trump and things that would help Hillary Clinton in almost every single aspect? Isn't it possible that in each specific decision in a vacuum, they could have done so only because they were incompetent or they saw a shiny bauble and said, let's do that? Hypothetically, yes, that's possible, in the same way that it's possible that I guess we could all be in a matrix and that this could all be a simulation. That too is possible. But in the face of overwhelming evidence, where we see that there was obvious bias to the point where lead agents were talking about insurance policies, to the point where they were illegally spying on Trump, to the point where almost every single time they were going after people connected to Trump, they were going as hard as possible. But when they were going after people they were connected to Hillary, they were going as easy as possible. That at some point, especially when the IG says, in this one particular issue you raised about James Comey and announcing things about the closure of the investigation into Hillary Clinton, that they literally at that point were expressly worried about the bias bias from people like Strzok and Page, and were never given justifiable answers by the FBI. Let me turn the question to you. Do you think it's entirely possible, given the absolute known bias of the FBI, that they decided to prioritize the Russia investigation over the Wiener laptop because they wanted to hurt Trump and help Hillary?
Is it possible? Yeah, of course it's possible, but there's no evidence for that, just conjecture.
Let me ask you this further. Do you think it would be a big deal if they did that?
If they were intentionally trying to bury some cases in an attempt to, be politically biased, that would be a big deal, yeah.
Okay, given that, don't you think that there should be an investigation, that the FBI should have to come up with justifiable answers?
It seems like that they did this. Isn't that what this is? An investigation, and they didn't find any good justifiable answers? If the answer is just incompetence, then they wouldn't have any good answers, right?
So then you would say that that's sufficient. Well, the FBI is just incompetent. Do you think that every single person involved should be fired then?
I don't. I would have to know the internal reasonings for why they ignored this particular thing. I'm not sure.
Can you come up with an answer short of incompetence or corruption of why this would have occurred?
I don't have access to the totality of like all of the FBI's investigative arms and body. I don't know. Like, for instance, let's say that we did a big audit and we found out that there were like 300 outstanding FBI cases that they have the resources to deal with, but for some reason they just aren't. Then I would say like, this is like, I mean, it's bad and it needs to be improved, but I would say like, it's whatever. But let's say that we did an investigation of the FBI and we found out that actually the average response time for a case of this level of importance, where where an executive director brings it to the attention of the team, usually it's solved in like 1 to 3 days. But for this, it took 20 or 30 days, maybe even more if somebody wouldn't have brought it up. Then I'd say like, ooh, there's probably something more that needs to be dug into that there. Yeah, but it would depend on like the response to those investigations. But the FBI has investigated itself and been investigated by other parties. Damn, how many fucking times now? How many different reports? How many internal investigations? How many, like the Durham report? How many Senate Judiciary? Like all these hearings, all these reports, all this shit. And you don't even like the part of this report that disagrees with you. So I mean, like,
it has nothing to do with disagreeing. I correctly articulated what it said. The way it's being spun is showing, there was no bias. No, what it's saying is they were unable to prove bias. They found examples of bias. They clearly did. It shows it all through the report.
Yeah, but they also find examples of people that they'd cleared of bias, not pursuing.
No, they did not. That is not true. They did not clear anyone of bias. They were unable to find evidence proving their bias, which is different. When you say clear bias, that implies that like they were looking at their emails and saw that their emails somehow showed.
Okay, so then your purported here. Okay, so then your assumption here is that every single agent in the FBI is biased, then, or a majority of them are, or
that is not. My assumption is that the culture at the top of the FBI was clearly biased and was prioritizing helping the candidate they wanted, just like Chuck Schumer said they would, that they would find 6 ways of Sunday at getting back. And the Durham report suggests as much as well. And I've gone over both of these things with you in the past, where the Durham report expressly says that he's not even really interested in suggesting actual policy changes. It's more of a problem of the culture of the FBI not living up to their message of fidelity to the law, right?
Okay, so and then you're saying that then when they did finally go through the laptop, that they lied about what they found.
Wait, no, I'm not necessarily. I'm saying they went through it at a rapid pace. It could have been that somehow they went through it, and I'm not even suggesting that those emails on that laptop shows any guilt of Hillary. Let me go further than that. I don't ever think Hillary should have been locked up for the emails.
Wait, hold on. We're not even doing this. I'm just saying that, like, you're saying, wow, JD Base, $600. You're saying that
if that's mine, right? Since I'm
wait, but so they went through the laptop and there was nothing there of value.
So they claim, and that could be true.
Wait, what do you mean? So they claim? So
right, that's what I mean. So they claim. So they went through it in 3 days, said we looked at all the emails, it's all good. Comey came out and said, hey, we found these emails, we have to relook into them because a whistleblower went outside the FBI, which forced their hand. He had already made an ass of himself.
Gotcha.
Right?
Okay, I got it. Okay, I have to listen. Okay, just to like wrap a bow on all of this and just ask sort of broad. So,
okay, well, just to connect this to sort of like the idea.
To connect all this. So despite the fact that this IG report doesn't seem to assert that there was like foul play, but that there was bias and that might have hampered the investigative process, even though the emails were searched for on all of this and they went through the 300,000 emails or whatever, but apparently they didn't find anything. You're comfortable feeling pretty strongly that there was some kind of overt or covert act here to help Hillary Clinton. Even though there's no direct evidence of that anywhere here, you feel comfortable saying that. But for something like Donald Trump spreading verifiably false election misinfo and voter rigging that everybody around him was telling him false over and over, for that, you can't possibly know if Trump was trying to do something intentionally wrong. You're willing to give him the benefit of the doubt there, even though he's telling lies that every single person around him is saying is wrong over and over and over again. How do you rationalize the double standard?
So what I'm saying is, when you have top FBI agents that are tasked with investigating both Hillary and Trump simultaneously, that are admitting that they want an insurance policy to stop Donald Trump, when you have action after action after action that is called out by the Inspector General in the mid-year exam investigation into Hillary Clinton, where he's like, this is problematic, this is problematic, this is problematic, almost every single one of them going in the direction of giving the benefit of the doubt to Hillary, and then you have problematic action after action after action, including illegal spying on Trump's team, that are as hard as possible going after Trump on the other hand, that we start to develop a pattern that you could put in connection with their statements and their obvious bias, both contemporaneously in the forms of people like Strzok and Page saying they want insurance policies to stop Trump, and post hoc where you see people like James Comey that clearly hated Donald Trump and has made it his mission to go after Donald Trump in as many ways as possible, even going so far as to withhold evidence and give it to a journalist friend of his, which recommended a charge from a grand jury for him mishandling that evidence. It's clear to see that there is a pattern over and over and over again that shows that the most likely response is that it was done so for corrupt reasons, to protect Hillary Clinton and to go after the people they don't like, just like Chuck Schumer admitted that if you criticize the FBI, they'll find 6 ways of Sunday to get back at you. And that's what they did even at the start in 2015, and they've continued to do to Trump going into 2023 and going into 2024. That's what's occurring. And I'm saying that even if your explanation, the only other possible explanation that could be given is, well, we should ignore all of that and just look at everything in a vacuum and say it could just be gross incompetence, then why would we accept anything that agency says going forward on any other matter? If they are so incompetent that they literally didn't know things like they weren't supposed to change an email that says, yes, Carter Page did help the CIA, to say, no, he didn't help the CIA. If they're that incompetent that they didn't know that, why should we trust them in anything that they ever talk about? Right? And this is what the IG
because, well, why would you trust them? Because we have third-party oversight for these agencies. Because we see... What do you mean? Didn't we just literally read an Inspector General report?
Yes.
So didn't we have the Durham report? Can't Congress authorize people? And does the FBI ever turn out anything credible ever? Or is everything from the FBI uncredible and they just might have issues relating to political bias in these types of charged issues?
Well, I would say it's the latter. But if your explanation is, no, it has nothing to do with corruption and bias, it's just that they're incompetent.
Hold on. I never said it didn't have anything to do with bias. This report here asserts that it has something to do with bias. They literally said that in this report. But you're not claiming it was bias. You're claiming that it was an intentional effort to obstruct an investigation of something potentially incriminating with Hillary. And then you also believe that the 300,000 email investigation was also faked, even if you're not saying it. You do believe that. So you're going way further than this IG report goes.
No. If it was biased, then it is corrupt. If the FBI decided to do actions that were...
bias and corrupt are two different things, to be fair.
Hear me out. Okay, if the FBI does something against their policies, right, that's not allowed within their policies, or that's against the law, right, and they did so for bias reasons, is that not the definition of corruption?
When I think the worst thing that was shown in the Durham report was the one guy that... Wasn't there one guy that faked part of a FISA warrant or whatever?
Well, the Kevin Kleinsmith was criminally charged.
That would be an example of like corruption, yeah. But like preferring some investigations over another, I think is an example of political bias. Would I call it corruption? Probably not, but it's definitely something that needs to be fixed. I think it's a huge problem for sure.
I would call that corruption, but nonetheless, even if we don't, there's still levels much higher than just prioritizing an investigation. For example, the IG report says the most damning thing that happened was that the FISA warrant relied on a suspected Russian spy by the name of Igor.
Wait, yeah, I know. We're not going to know every other fucking thing. I understand. Okay.
Well, right. I understand, and that behooves you. One, it's difficult.
No, it's me. It's like I don't have time to jump through every single fucking conspiracy assertion that with no solid evidence for literally any of the stuff we were talking about. Okay.
It's not.
To be clear, the only thing that you've proven the entire time is that there was a bias culture at the FBI and that probably delayed the reading of the emails on the laptop. That's the only thing that you've proven the entire time in like the past like hour and a half of investigating. That's the only thing
No. Let's be clear what happened, right? Like, let's go through a couple things here. One, it's because you directly brought up this issue of Comey announcing about Hillary's investigation, and I went to that specific issue.
Yeah, because I was curious why he announced it ahead of time. None of this, I don't think even said anything about why Comey announced it ahead of time. All of that is speculation on your part.
On this part of why he reopened the investigation, I was vindicated. The evidence said exactly what I said.
I never had a question about why it was reopened. I had a question about why it was announced to the public. That was the whole initial question I had.
the people that usually bring up I misinterpreted exactly what you said, and you seem to be contentious on this issue that we were talking about. We could talk about specifically why he announced them the way he announced it.
Hold up. No, I said that I don't know why he ever announced the reopening the investigation. And you said it's because he felt pressure by a whistleblower.
Right. So you just admit, you said, I don't know why he announced the reopening. That's what I thought you said.
Yeah.
Right. The reopening, which is exactly what I showed.
Why did he announce it? That was the crazy part. Them reopening the investigation, there's nothing wrong with that. If the FBI wants to reopen the investigation, do it. But announcing it publicly is a big break from norms that super damaged Hillary's campaign.
He announced it publicly, as I said, because that and you have nothing to dispute this, as he said in his book, which I don't have in front of me, he thought Hillary Clinton was going to win, and he thought that, seeing as how he told Congress that the case was closed, he told the American people the case was closed. If it really wasn't closed, right, and the American people later found out that it looks like the FBI was intentionally not acting on this information until a whistleblower forced their hand, that they would correctly blame James Comey and the FBI for putting their thumb on the scale by lying to the American people.
All of this is conjecture that you can't prove, okay? Comey himself, Comey, if you can find me anything with Comey talking about, because we looked at this yesterday because it came up in an unrelated thing. I thought Comey said that he wanted to make an announcement because he thought that it looked improper for the FBI not to say anything because of Loretta Lynch's meetings with Clinton. These were the reasons why he felt like he needed to say something publicly, which was a break from norms. This pressure from whistleblower stuff, this is completely and totally invented by you based on this IG report.
Correct me if I'm wrong. What you're talking about is his initial announcement of the closing of the investigation when he mentions Loretta Lynch.
Yeah, I believe so.
Right. So when it comes to the reopening, that's a different question than the Loretta Lynch situation.
Okay, where is your evidence for the reopening part?
Well, we've already talked about why they reopened. So
Stop. Why do you keep saying that, Rob? I'm asking you about... I'm asking you, why did he announce it publicly?
Right, which is what I was getting to. So you misspoke there, and I was just clarifying.
I didn't misspeak. This whole conversation opened because I said, why did Comey announce it publicly? Why did he announce the reopening publicly?
Okay, so he announced the reopening public because he announced the closing publicly.
That's the answer?
Right.
Okay.
He told the American people and Congress, this investigation is closed. And then a whistleblower forced an outside agency to come to them and said, no, it's not.
None of this has anything. The whistleblower is none of this matters. I don't know why you're saying. I just was curious why he announced it publicly, because that was a huge break from norms, and both of those announcements damaged Hillary's campaign.
And let's look at the line that you stopped reading at the IG report there at the bottom page of 14th. You read this part. The FBI's inaction had potentially far-reaching consequences. Next line, quote, Comey told the OIG that had he known about the laptop in the beginning of October and thought the email review could have been completed before the election, it may have affected his decision to notify Congress. Comey told the OIG, I don't know if it would have put us in a different place, but I have liked to have had the opportunity. Then it says, Comey's decision to notify Congress on October 28th. Following the briefing by the mid-year team on October 27, 2016, Comey authorized the mid-year team to seek a search warrant, telling the OIG it had volumes of emails and presence of BlackBerry emails on the laptop. As we described in Chapter 13, McCabe joined this meeting. The issue of notifying Congress about the Wiener laptop was first raised at the October 27th briefing. Over the course of the next 24 hours, numerous additional discussions occurred within the FBI. As we described in Chapter 10 of our report, the factors considered were Comey's belief that failure to disclose...
Wait, where did you just... Well, holy shit. Oh, the issue of notifying Congress 14. Of the Wiener... No, page 15 now, right?
Yeah, so that was... I started on page 14, so now we're on page 15.
Yep.
Quote, first, Comey's belief that failure to disclose the existence of the emails would be considered an act of concealment. Well, isn't that what I said? That he was worried the American people would say, he said the investigation was closed, and then they reopened it, and that he lied to us. He covered this up.
Is that an act of concealment to the American public? Rob, I don't even know what the fuck we're talking about right now. Hold on. Is this belief that failure to disclose the existence of emails would be an act of concealment to the American public or to Congress or what?
Let me read this slowly again, right?
No, hold on, wait. You don't have to reread it. I can read.
Well, you're not doing a great job then, because it's answering your questions. I have read all this before. I just didn't know where it was in this document because I just searched them. So as you're talking, I literally go to the paragraph you stopped, and it's answering the questions almost verbatim in the way that I answered them to you, with you saying there's no proof. It's just my conjecture. So can I read the reasons that James Comey announced this? Isn't that what you're waiting for? Let's read them.
Sure.
1, his belief that failure to disclose the existence of the emails would be considered an act of concealment. 2nd, the belief that Comey had an obligation to update Congress because discovery was potentially significant and made his prior testimony the investigation was closed no longer true. 3rd, you ready for this one? An implicit assumption that Hillary would be elected president. Which is exactly what I said. He was worried that she would be elected president, and this would be seen as him concealing it. So he was forced to announce, hurry up and close the investigation, which is exactly what I told you.
Wait, you told me that a whistleblower had pressured him to fear that the information would leak yeah, I heard you, yeah.
So the reason that they reopened it was the whistleblower. The reason that he went public, he thought Hillary Clinton was going to win.
That is not the reason. That's like one of like 10 reasons listed here.
Okay, you want to go through the rest? They're all in conjunction with what I said there.
Concern that failing to disclose resulted in an accusation the FBI had engineered a cover-up to help get Clinton elected. Concerns about protecting the reputation of the FBI. Concerns about the perceived illegitimacy of a Clinton presidency that would follow from a failure to disclose to discover the emails if they proved to be significant. Concerns about the electoral impact concerns about the electoral impact of any announcement, and the belief that the email review could not be completed before the election. Why wouldn't any of these apply to the Trump thing?
What are you talking about?
Why wouldn't they use any of these reasons to announce the ongoing Trump investigation?
Well, the Trump investigation...
Like, for instance, wouldn't Comey's belief here that not announcing the Trump investigation would be a concealment? Or wouldn't Comey feel like, I guess, an implicit assumption that Clinton would be elected president? I don't understand this rationale, I guess.
Okay, first, let me just say, I'll answer your question, but that's a pivot, right? So I was correct, and I would appreciate acknowledgement that I was correct as to why it was reopened and why it was announced that it was reopened. I was correct.
Yeah, although my initial question had to do with the announcing of the initial closure, but sure, for the reopening, well, you were correct, yes. Although when I asked you, you just said he only felt the pressure to announce this because he announced the closing of the last one. But now that we've read this, now you're going back to, oh no, wait, actually, I did remember this. So sure, I'll give it to you. Sure.
No, I had said quite specifically that he thought that Hillary Clinton was going to win. That's what he said in his book. And that it would be an albatross around her neck, and it would be considered that the FBI covered up for Hillary to help her win. And almost every one of these reasons that they give, that it would damage the reputation of the FBI, that it would be accused that the FBI had a conspiracy to help Hillary, that he thought Hillary was going to win. Almost everything the IG report says is in total line with what I initially said. I read it before, but I forgot that where it was in the document. And as I briefly went down as you were talking,
sure.
The
and we found it. I understand.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Yep. Thank you. Now, why wouldn't they do this with Trump? Several reasons. One, because they were leaking to the press beforehand about the investigation of Trump. Harry Reid was telling the American public a week outside the election that was occurring. Second, they didn't think Trump was going to win. Right? Third, they were going after Trump, and probably because they were biased against Trump, knew that they would be bringing some form of criminal charges. Had they thought Trump was going to win, I think the calculus would change. I think they would have had more overt or covert leaks of the actual investigation into Trump because they thought that it possibly could have hurt his chances. But they thought that they had it all wrapped up. Comey thought Hillary was going to win. It was all cool. They were covering up for Hillary. They were making sure things weren't out there. They were closing everything up in a nice, neat bow. Hillary had a 99% chance to win. So they didn't need to publicly announce these things. The one criticism that could be made of James Comey is in his attempts to help Hillary Clinton and his belief that Hillary Clinton was going to win, he ballsily comes out and makes this announcement. And the announcement was improper.
Wait a second. At what part of this is he doing this announcement to help Hillary win?
Well, that's my interpretation of what's going, and it seems evident based on the evidence. But
wait, why would you add that when that's not listed in anything here at all?
Well, I'm adding that because that's my interpretation of it, right? Let me fill out what I was going to say here. The part where, regardless of his motivations, James Comey was the most wrong. He should have never came out and said, we're not charging Hillary, but here's a bunch of shitty things she did. That's wrong. You should never do that. He did that, one, because we could prove he thought Hillary was going to win, and he didn't want any excuses. He didn't want to say, we're not going to say anything, we've just declined to bring charges, Hillary to win, and then all of a sudden,
didn't he explicitly state that the reason why he made an announcement the first time is because Loretta Lynch's meeting with Clinton seemed improper, and he felt like he had to go above and beyond to make
Yes, and that goes in line with what I'm saying. What he didn't want was for Hillary to win, and then all of a sudden, all of these questions to arise. Wait a minute, they did find classified emails? Wait a minute, Loretta Lynch did meet with Bill Clinton? Wait a minute, Loretta Lynch said all this shit? This sounds like a cover-up, which would have seen as a delegitimization. He thought Hillary's going to win, so it didn't matter if he came out and said this, because Hillary was still going to win. I think, and this is my opinion on it based on all the evidence we see, that Comey and the FBI wanted Hillary to win, as Chuck Schumer told us. And that's why all of these disparities with the Hillary investigation, barring that one issue, the announcing of things she did wrong, but then saying, but we're not going to charge her, which there's significant dispute as to whether any reasonable prosecutor would have charged her. That's a bullshit claim. But I actually have no problem charging her because I think it is the norm in Washington for people to mishandle classified information. And if you're going to charge Hillary, then you got to charge George Bush, then you got to charge Obama, then you got to charge Mike Pence, then you got to charge Trump.
Right?
You got to charge
classified
everyone.
Information isn't even a crime. It's intentionally mishandling it, right?
Well, but yes, but I digress. I think that it was beyond dispute that she intentionally set up that server, knowing that there would be classified information. Nonetheless, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. My point is that it seems evident to me, based on the discrepancies we see of how one investigation was handled with as light a touch as possible, and the other was as heavy a touch as possible, and Comey's admission that he thought Hillary Clinton was going to win. That explains his actions. That the reason he came out and announced this wasn't to hurt Hillary Clinton, as Democrats are keen to say. Oh, James Comey cost her the election. If you say that they were biased against Trump,
that's not what anybody says. Nobody says that. Nobody says that Comey did it intentionally to nuke Clinton. What they say is that Comey engaged in an egregious breach of norms that probably cost Hillary the election. Which is, both of those are true, and you've admitted as much.
But they go further than that, and let me be specific as to what they say. They say that in rebuttal to when someone like me talks about the corruption of the FBI. So when I point out a bunch of evidence that shows how corrupt the FBI was in going after Trump and Trump-connected people, and how easy they were going after Hillary and Hillary-connected people, one of the rebuttals that I always get is, but then how do you explain the fact that James Comey came out and said in the closing of the investigation of Hillary Clinton and the reopening of the investigation 3 days before the election? Well, I just gave you the evidence. He didn't do that because he was trying to harm Hillary Clinton. The evidence strongly suggests
No, he was doing it because he was
otherwise.
trying to buoy his reputation or the reputation of the FBI.
Right. And he thought Hillary was going to win, and he didn't want this to be seen as...
Sure, hold on.
The
He didn't think that his announcement would damage her so much that it would affect it, but he was still, the priority here was always the reputation of the FBI.
Again, it's also, he talks about how he thought Hillary would win, so if you're talking about the reputation of the FBI...
But when he's saying here, I thought Hillary would win, the reason he's saying this is because, well, sure, this might damage her, but, she's going to win anyway. That's the whole point of bringing that point up, right?
Okay, so if he's concerned, would you say the reputation of the FBI would also be in ensuring that the president and the person that was going to be in charge of the FBI had a good relationship with the people of the FBI? Could that be a potential for upholding the reputation of the FBI to the leader of the FBI, the next president?
Not necessarily.
But it could be, correct?
That he's trying to maintain the reputation of the... I don't think that his statement, it felt like this was more of the reputation of the FBI in the eye of the public, not any elected official. I don't know if anybody wants an FBI that's making these types of announcements, right? Wouldn't you say that's true, that nobody wants an FBI that makes announcements like this?
Well, I would hope not, but that's certainly not true. There are plenty of people that are partisans.
Do you think Donald Trump would want an FBI like this?
If it was going after his opponents, probably.
Really? Didn't Donald Trump literally say explicitly that he fired Comey because of the public announcement of the reopening of the investigation?
I don't know exactly what his public declaration was, but it's evident based on conversations he had with people that the reason he fired Comey was because in private, Comey was telling Trump he wasn't a target of the Russia investigation, but in public, he was refusing to say as much.
Oh, so he fired him because of obstruction of justice.
Well, that's one way of interpreting it, right? I think it's heinous. I mean, I guess he could have just deleted subpoenaed emails and left off the hook like Hillary's team. But
wait, how is that not? How is that not literally obstruction of justice? If he's firing Comey because he's not giving him information about an investigation related to him.
If he's saying privately you're not being investigated, but publicly won't say it, what justice is being obstructed?
Because he's firing him for not giving him details of an investigation related to him. He's obstructing justice.
That's not. He didn't say, I can't give you the details of who's being investigated. He's assuring Trump privately, you're not the target of this. You're not. And Comey's even admitted this. Comey said that when he talked to Trump, Trump said, hey, if there were bad actors in my camp working with Russians, by all means, get them. But can you just tell I'm getting eaten alive in the public. There's all these leaks coming out of your office. I'm being accused of being a Russian stooge.
Wait, if that's a fine statement to make, then why wouldn't Trump just say that publicly? Comey wasn't telling me privately what he was saying publicly, so I fired him for it. Why would he use the Hillary thing?
I don't know. I don't give a shit. It's irrelevant. Why do you think he fired? Why do you think he fired Comey?
For what I just said, probably because of the obstruction of justice. He wanted to try to fuck with the investigation as much as he could.
Why? The investigation thoroughly showed that he didn't have any illicit contacts with Russia.
I don't know if he knew that. We don't even know if that's true. That's what the investigation showed. But
so wait, you think that Trump thought, actually, I did collude with Russia?
I don't know if Trump would have known if any of the statements that he'd made publicly or any of the meetings that happened privately crossed any thresholds of legality. I don't know if Trump knows any of the legality on any of this. Also, as you've said before, right, just because something was found doesn't mean that nothing was there. I don't know. That'd be my guess. Otherwise, why the fuck would he fire him? That seems weird as fuck. It's like the most...
He fired him because what happened was...
Wait, okay, listen, we can go over this part. Okay, I gotta say, it's 11:22. I'm already like an hour and 20 minutes, and now we're jumping into like the Comey firing and everything else. I don't care. Listen.
You did it.
It's been fun.
You're the one who brought it up.
All right, thank you. I love you, buddy.